Hikaru Nakamura. If you know that name, then I'm not sure if you know that the modern defense is his favorite opening. He's always playing it. Like, it doesn't really matter what white plays. Usually when they play against e4, he plays g6, followed by bishop g7, and then the pawn goes to d6, the other pawn goes to a6, and then his idea is to play b5. Like, usually it goes like this: bishop c4, pawn b5, force the bishop to go back, put your bishop on b7, hit the pawn, and we're already trying to play moves like b5, chasing away the knight, and then win the pawn on e4. So sometimes they play a3, we go knight d7. The plan is to play c5, knight f6, castle the king, and get some crazy attacks. To prep for this video, I've watched a couple of Hikaru games playing the modern, and I'm going to be showing you guys everything that you need to learn about the modern. So watch the full video, apply what I teach, and your ratings will go through the roof. Kicking things off in the 500 region, today I'm going to be showing you guys the modern defense, and it starts by playing the move pawn to g6, and then once the opponent make their move, we're always going to be fianchettoing the king side bishop, and we're going to be fianchettoing the queen side bishop. But there's a very nice way to do it. First, we play the move pawn to d6, just to get some control over the center of the board, and then the plan from there is to play a6 followed by b5. Put the bishop on b7 and target the pawn on e4. So knight c3 was played. Let's play pawn a6. This is the modern defense that we're playing here. Bishop to d3. If you notice, he's trying to already protect the pawn. Now I'm going to play pawn to b5. The idea is to apply as much pressure as possible to the opponent's center. So in the modern, what we're basically doing is we're giving the opponent good control over the center, and then we're just going to be taking it back from him. So he decides to castle, getting his king out the center of the board. Pretty standard stuff. Let's just fianchetto the next bishop. And, as you guys saw in the intro, the plan is to play knight d7, pawn b5. Eventually, the knight goes to f6. We get the king out the center of the board. This is how Hikaru Nakamura plays the modern defense. And, if you want to get good at the modern defense, then watch this video. So queen to e2 was played. Let's continue by playing the move. Let's play pawn c5. I like to play pawn c5, and this is like this trap is very typical in the modern defense. When you play this move pawn c5 and their bishop is on d3, you could actually just play pawn c4 and the bishop is trapped. Like, there's nowhere for the bishop to go. We're 10 moves into the modern and we're already ahead by a piece. Okay, he decides to play pawn to e5, which is also a counting issue. I mean, I have 3 pieces covering e5. He only has the knight on the pawn. But let's just start by taking the bishop. We're now just ahead by an entire bishop. And now I'm going to take on e5 because I have more attackers than defenders. That is called counting, by the way. And then once he takes on e5, we just take. We're hitting the queen. If he wants to trade the queens off the board, that's on him. I'm the one who is ahead in material. He took with the knight. Let's just take back with the bishop. Again, if he wants to trade, he could trade. And it will just be helping me, by the way, because it's helping me to put my rook on the open file. And as you guys know, and you've heard me say this a lot, to take is a mistake. So if he takes my queen, he's helping my rook. So rook to d1 was played, and that was a slightly better move. Let's just develop the knight to f6. I'm just trying to ensure that I have all my pieces in the game, all my pieces doing something. And he still has the opportunity to trade both rooks off the board, but I don't mind if he trade. Once you're ahead in material, your whole game plan becomes trading. Okay, he pulls the queen back, so now he doesn't want to trade. The rook is now just clearly attacking my queen, but offense is the best defense. Instead of just like, okay, let me block the attack, where do I put the queen? Yes, we have to move the queen, but we're going to put the queen somewhere where we attack some things. Notice how my queen and my bishop is on the same diagonal pointing towards the king. And I say this a lot, whenever we're trying to attack the opponent's pawns, we should try to, whenever we're trying to attack the opponent's king, we should try to attack the pawns around the opponent's king. And then he plays rook to d2, which means he just didn't see the idea. Another example of counting. I have 1, 2 pieces attacking h2. He only has his king guarding h2. Take on h2. That's just a free pawn. And now he has to move the king. It doesn't mean that he's going to be getting checkmated right here, but he just has to move his king out the way. Now I'm going to pull the bishop back to e5 because I'm seeing some ideas of setting up some checkmates in this position. And again, I'm ahead by 4 points. The goal is to trade the pieces off the board. So if I'm able to just take the knight, so that way I'm able to get the bishop off this diagonal and then get my queen to h2, I'm going to be threatening mate on h1, and I'm going to be threatening his g2 pawn. And I'm also attacking the knight twice. He's only guarding it once, so let's just take the knight. Now, once he take back, we could take the pawn, but let's just go for the mate. Like queen to h2 is us just threatening. We're threatening mate on h1, and we have two pieces attacking his pawn on g2. And again, attacking the opponent's king means attack the pawns and squares around the king. He moves his king out the way, which means once I check, he blocks with the queen. So let's not check. Instead, I'm going to take on g2. Now I'm threatening to mate again, because if he allows me to check and he blocks with the queen, I take the queen and that's mate. That being said, he needs to create some running score for his king. Like maybe move this rook out the way. That's what he did, because now if I check, his king is going to run. But no, I'm not going to do that, because his king is in what is called a mating net. It's best to, well, it's not in a mating net. The move I'm about to play will put him in a net. So it's best to catch the opponent's king in a net, and then you start attacking it instead of just trying to chase around the king. So knight to e4. Now he's in a mating net. Now the king is not able to move. Now it's going to be nearly impossible for his king to run away, and we're just going to be checkmating him. So he plays pawn to f3, should not help. This should be checkmated in 1, 2, about 3 moves. Like once I check on h1, he blocks with the bishop, grab the bishop, has to block with the queen, grab the queen, and that's going to be a checkmate. We're playing the modern defense like Hikaru. And if you want to play against me in these types of videos, just comment your chess.com username with the ratings and wait for my message. He blocks with the queen, and that's just a checkmate. More modern defense against 600 players. Stick around. Our opponent is now 600, and I'm still going to be showing you guys the modern defense, Hikaru Nakamura's favorite line. And it really doesn't matter what white plays, to be honest. We're always going to start by just fianchettoing our dark squared bishop, putting the d pawn in the center of the board, and then the plan is just to play a6 b5 and attack the opponent's bishop, fianchetto our bishop, hit the pawn on e4. So pawn to d4, he's controlling the center, but the idea of the modern is to give them control over the center and then eventually take it back. So let's just play pawn to a6. The plan is to play pawn to b5, hit the bishop. Oof, pawn to a4. Pawn to a4 prevents me from playing b5. That's called prophylaxis. Now, whenever they do this, I like to just still play pawn to b6, because I'm just trying to put my bishop on that diagonal. Now, he castles the king. Let's put the bishop on the diagonal, attacking the unprotected pawn on e4. He plays knight c3 to guard the pawn. And there's something that I want you guys to keep in mind. If knight d7, you have to watch out for bishop f7, king f7, knight check, king move, knight e6, and that's just a fork. So with that being said, I'm going to play e6 before I play knight d7. And my knight on g8 is also flexible. Pawn to d5 is interesting. I think he's trying to open the center of the board, seeing my king is in the center, but I'm not going to allow that. Let's play pawn to e5 and then close the center. Now, one thing about the modern defense, it can be transposed in all your favorite lines. Now, bishop to g5 hits the queen. Let's just play pawn to f6, hits the bishop. Eventually, the pawn is going to go to f5. He pulls his bishop back to e3. Let's just play knight e7 actually, and then castle the king, play f5, and then the kingside attack is going to start. So the modern defense can be transposed into the Perk, it can be transposed into the King's Indian. Like all of these ideas with g6, the modern defense can be transposed in them all. So queen d2 means he wants to play bishop h6. That's fine though. Let's just castle. My dark squared bishop is already a bad bishop. My goal is to play f5 and start my attack that way. Now he plays bishop h6. We're not necessarily going to be rushing it. Let's just play knight d7. It's funny. This is the modern defense. It can also be transposed into the hippopotamus defense. Yes, I said it. The hippo is actually a very respectable line to play against. Like it may not be the most principled line, but it's solid and it's hard to play against. So pawn to b4 is to prevent my knight from going to c5. I want to play f5, but I don't want his knight on the g5 square that easily. So let me play the move rook to f7. I want to play something like queen to f8, force him to take, and then I take back, and then I'm going to slowly attack him on the king side. So he decides to take. Okay, now I'm going to take with the rook actually. So my rook is now on the same line as his king. So he has to be careful. Now I also has to be careful because I want to play f5, but there's a drawback. If I play f5, his knight gets access to g5, which gets access to e6. So if I could play f5 like after he moves the knight, then that would be good. Okay, queen to e3 was played. Now let's play queen to f8. I'm just slowly transferring my pieces over to the king side because there's not really much that he could do on the queen side, and there's not much that he could do in the center. Anytime he plays a5, I'm not going to take because it allows his rook to be active. I'm just going to play pawn to b5, and we just gain a tempo on his bishop. So the bishop went back. Now f5, knight g5, f4, queen moves. f5, maybe g5. Let's try g5. g5, knight g6 to f4 is also a very nice plan. You see, you have to be flexible when you're playing these lines because f5, I still want to play f5, but you know, it's kind of tricky playing f5. So now we're going to play knight g6. Eventually, we want to put the knight on f4, and I'm also trying to push my h-pawn all the way up the board. King to g2. Now, knight to f4 is actually surprisingly a decent move because if he takes, I take and I win the queen. But once I check, he's just not going to take it. He's just going to move his king. So it's actually something that I have to set up. So let's play the move queen to f7. So once I check on the king move, I could try to play queen h5 and then queen h3. And then anytime he takes, I hit the queen and then the queen move and he's mated. Okay, rook to a3. Not seeing what that does. That rook is not doing anything. Let's go for the plan. Knight to f4 check. Now, we're not assuming that he's going to take because, you know, the 600 guy is playing well. But if he takes, it's just a discovered attack on his queen and I win the queen. But I'm expecting him to move the king and then I play queen to h5 because I want to play moves like queen to h3 and just keep creating threats because I know that my knight is untouchable on f4. Okay, bishop moves to e2. Bishop moves to e2. Let's play queen to h3, threatening mate. Thing is, he's able to defend against the mate, though. That's the thing. He's able to play knight e1 and defend against the mate. Oh, come on, bro. You were playing so well. Why do you take? No, I take, and I don't even want the queen. That's checkmating too, because it opens the line for the rook. It's a discovered attack on your queen. The king has to move. That's a free queen, but that's just a checkmate. More modern defense against 700 players. Stick around. Our opponent is now 700. Let's continue to play some modern defense. Knight c3, we fianchet to the bishop. f4, we play d6. He's playing some Grand Prix type of setup, which means he's going to want to try to attack me on the king side. Okay, queen to f3, that develops the queen a bit too early. Like usually we play a6, b5, but if a6, b5, the queen is also on this diagonal. So let's just play knight to f6 with some cool little ideas of playing knight to d4 and attack his queen, which means the modern can also be transposed into the Sicilian dragon and not the accelerated dragon. Okay, bishop to b5, pins the knight. Not bad. Maybe he's going to be giving up his bishop for a knight, you know, but who knows? This is one of those cases where we're just going to be developing the knight to f6 and simply castling the king. And once I castle the king, knight to d4 becomes a threat if he doesn't decide to just give up his bishop for a knight. Okay, so he took. Let's just take. This is about to be very interesting because the queen is on the same line as my unprotected pawn. And maybe he's thinking about playing pawn to e5 and after takes, queen takes. But looks like he's not going to be doing that. Let's just use the time to get the king out the center of the board. I mean, this is a decent position for white, to be honest. Rook to b8 is also coming, you know, just get my least active piece, which in this case is my rook on this open file. But first, I'm going to play pawn to d5, threatening some forks on d4. He decided to castle the king, didn't even look on what my last move is doing. Maybe he thinks I'm going to take and then the rook is going to get the file. But that's a fork, bro. That's just a fork. Just like that, we're winning the game. Keep in mind, bishop to g4 is also a skewer, which is winning. So maybe I should have played bishop b4 first, take the rook, then fork. But let's see. Okay, so he gave up the bishop. Let's grab the bishop, knight e2, good move. Let's just move the queen out the way. I want to play rook to b1 and mate him on b2. Okay, king to b1 was played. Let's go rook to b8. I'm now threatening checkmate on b2, so I'm assuming he's going to play pawn to b3. That's like one of the only moves that prevents the mate. And then I'm thinking of playing moves like bishop g4 or just pawn a5 to a4. Because no bishop to g4 doesn't do anything because the knight on e2 is in the way. So after he plays pawn b3, I may hit him with a5. And I'm just trying to open more lines pointing towards his king. So pawn b3, pawn to a5. The plan is to play pawn to a4. And if the knight takes, I take because the b pawn is pinned. Remember, Pinned pieces don't protect. So he immediately plays knight a4. And as I said, the rook, everything is on the same line as the king. So once we simply take the knight on a4, the pawn is not able to take due to the spin. So now we're ahead by 2 pieces. Okay, pawn to e5 is interesting. It's attacking my knight. We have to move. So let's just put the knight in the center of the board. There's some ideas of knight c3. There's also some knight b4 ideas. Okay, he moves the rook. I want to find a way to get my knight on c3. That's not possible. Let's play queen to a3 because I want to play knight b4, and if I play knight b4, he would have took my queen and won the game. He's doing a decent job blocking my dark squared bishop out the attack, because the dark squared bishop would be like one of the main pieces in the attack here. Okay, knight to d4 was a drawback blunder. Knight was guarding the c2, the c3 square. Knight no longer guards the c3 square. So this is just checkmate in 2 moves. Because once I hit him with knight c3 check, the king is forced to go to a1, and then queen a2 is going to be a checkmate. So let's go knight c3 check. The king has to go to a1. And that's just a checkmate. More modern defense against 800 players. Stick around. Our opponent is now 800, and I'm still going to be teaching you guys the modern defense. And as I've been saying, we first fianchetto the king side bishop, and then we find a cool little way to fianchetto the queen side bishop. But first we have to play pawn to d6, like we have to try to have some level of control over the center of the board. But the whole idea of the modern is to give white the option of controlling the center, then we're going to be attacking the center with all our pieces and counter-attacking the center with our pawns. So bishop to e3 was played. Let's play the move pawn to a6. This is the whole idea of the modern. And okay, pawn to c4 is a very interesting move. Whenever they play pawn to c4, it prevents us from playing moves like pawn to b5, but we should still be able to play pawn to b6. And I've heard persons saying the modern could be similar to the hippo defense. And it's true, because if I wanted to play the hippo, I just need to play h6, put both of the knights on e7, and then just castle the king. So knight c3, let's put the bishop on b7. We're still applying some pressure to that pawn on e4. Okay, pawn to b3 was played, and the first thing I'm noticing is his knight is now unprotected. There's no way to get to that knight though, so let's continue with the development. Let's go knight d7. We can always play moves like knight to f6, and then eventually just get working out the center of the board. Okay, bishop back to d2. I guess he's not protecting his knight, but I don't think that was necessary right now though. Let's play knight f6. Let's finish our development, and let's try to get to our king out the center of the board. Okay, pawn to d5. Now he's thinking, because I was attacking his pawn twice, and he plays pawn to d5 to cut off my bishop from being an attacker. But now I'm going to play knight c5. So now I'm attacking his pawn on e4 twice again, and he's still only guarding it with his knight. And by the way, taking on e4, allowing him to take my knight, then taking the rook and giving him the bishop is not a good trade, because we don't want to only have a rook and a pawn and give the opponent a knight and a bishop. It's the same 6 points, and the knight and the bishop is usually stronger than the rook. So now he needs to play queen to c2 to add more defense to the pawn. Well, queen to e2. Okay, queen to e2 is actually different now. Queen to e2 is different because the knight is now pinned and the rook is now unprotected, which means once I take on e4, hit the knight, if the knight takes back, I should be able to just take a rook, or even take the knight, then take the rook. So it's completely different now. So, well, I think it would have been the same thing if he plays queen c2, because there's knight e4. Yeah, in both cases, knight e4 is just winning a pawn. Very, very nice tactic here. So knight takes e4. Let's think. Do I take an entire rook? Or do I take the knight, let him try to save the rook? Wait, how does this work? He's ahead by 2. Okay, let's just take the rook. Let's just take the rook since it's more material. And if he takes my knight, I just take back. I should be the one who is ahead in material. Like, I should be ahead by an exchange. So I should have an extra 2 points on him here. He sent me a message in the chat saying he didn't see that coming. It's the modern bishop, bro. There's a lot of stuff happens with these bishops, especially at these levels. So he took on c5. Let's just take back on c5. And in the end, we're actually ahead by 3 whole points. Okay, queen to d3. He wants to develop his bishop. let me just use the time to just get my king out the center of the board. And I'm not gonna lie, if it's possible, I would love to play e6, take on d5 and attack his king in the center. But he's playing h4, he's trying to play h5. Is this fast enough though? It's not. Pawn to e6, pawn to h5, I take. If he takes, I check. Blocks the check, I take. He has nothing. Let's play pawn to e6. My bishop is like the main defender of my king. So I'm not afraid of any little attacks that he think he has on my king here. Okay, bishop to h6, was expecting that. I don't think I want to trade the bishops off the board. So let's just play rook to e8, putting the rook on the same line as the queen. And I'm actually threatening to just take the pawn and the king is going to be in check. And then if he takes the pawn, I take with the rook and the king is going to be in check. And I've said this a lot. The best way to counter attack the opponent's king side attack or queen side attack, any flank attack, you counter attack flank attacks by simply attacking in the center of the board. Okay, now he plays bishop to e2, so that way I don't get the little discovered check. I'm still going to take on d5 though, because I'm trying to open this line for my rook. And then once he takes with the pawn, the bishop is pinned. So what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to apply more pressure to that pinned bishop. So with that being said, let's play the move queen to e7. That's PP on the PP. The bishop is pinned, we apply more pressure. I mean, castling is not a bad move here, but, well, castling allows me to trade, so technically it's a bad move. Because, you know, once the queens are traded off the board and I'm ahead by so many points, I'm gonna win. Okay, pawn to h5, he's continuing with his attack on the king side. And the question is, are we able to kick away the queen? That's the question. $1 million question. Now, I want to play pawn to a5, bishop a6, but that seems a bit too slow. Maybe I can distract the queen. That's what I'm going to do. I mean, it's not like it's a successful distraction, but it's a pawn, you know? Just take the pawn, knowing that if he takes, he's mated. Take the pawn, and if he takes, we simply take back and we're fine. And eventually, if things get out of hand, I'm ahead by 4 points. I'm just going to get the queens off the board. Okay, bishop went back to g5 to attack my queen. Okay, now it's time to just trade. Let's just trade the queens off the board. If you're ahead in material, just get the queens off the board. I'm ahead by 4 entire points. This is where we just start trading pieces off the board. So he takes the queen, I take his queen, and hey, bishops are better than knights, but when you're ahead in material, you know, you could do whatever you want to do. Okay, let's just take back on h6 first. Let's not do anything funny. I'm also trying to take on f3, play rook to e5, it's the bishop, swing the rook over, apply more pressure. That would be a nice idea. Okay, rook to h3. Now, initially I wanted to take the knight, but let's just play bishop to d3. That's also PP on the PP. And he has to find bishop to e3 here. And once he finds bishop e3, we take the bishop on e2, hit him with bishop to d4. Okay, he's playing well for 800. He's finding some moves, but let's take on e2 first. Now the king has to take, which means the bishop on e3 is pinned. Now I hit him with bishop to d4. And okay, I'm not going to be winning any material here, but because I'm already ahead by 4 points, the more pieces I trade off the board, the easier the game is going to be for me. Okay, knight to g5 doesn't do much. We don't have to rush to trade though. So let's just play pawn to a5. I'm going for a pawn breaks. By now, you guys should know the importance of pawn breaks. Pawn break is what open lines for your pieces. So seeing that my a rook is not doing anything, I want to play pawn a5. And then, you know, once I trade the rooks, once I trade the pawns, my rooks are going to be very active. Rook to f3. Okay, am I afraid of that? Nah, let's just play pawn to f6, hit the knight. My bishop is still guarding f6, so now I'm just forcing the knight to go back, and then I hit him with pawn to a4, and I'm still getting my rook in the game. I want you guys to notice how I'm not rushing to take the bishop. I'm going to take the bishop when he tries to get out of the pin. So let's just take on a4, and maybe I can also apply even more pressure to the pin bishop. Plus his pawn on a2 is now just hanging. Okay, knight to f4. Knight f4, let's just take on a2 with check. He's attacking g6, but he's not able to take it just yet due to the check. And then once he moves the king, now we take the bishop. And then because my pawn on g6 is under attack, I'm going to play king to g7, guarding the pawn, and everything here is fine. Rook attacks the pawn, just pawn to g5, defend the pawn. He checks, king up is now hitting the knight. The knight also, well, he's able to check on f4, But there's king to f5 and I'm fine. He decides to guard the knight. Now I play rook to b8. I'm threatening checkmate on b1, which he did not defend, which means that's just a checkmate. But more modern defense against 900 players. Stick around. Our opponent is now 900, and we're playing the modern defense against pawn to e4. So how it works is the bishop goes to g7, the pawn goes to d6, the pawn goes to a6, preparing b5 and bishop to b7. And as you can see, we're playing this against anything they do. He develops the bishop. Now we play pawn to b5. And already there's some ideas of bishop to b7, hit the pawn, pawn b4, chase away the knight. Queen to d2 was played. Let's go bishop to b7. And one thing about the modern is whenever they play early queen to d2, we're not afraid of bishop to h6 because we haven't developed our knight as yet. So now that he castle is king, pawn to b4 will not work because the knight is able to go to d5. And even if I play pawn to b4, knight a5, my b pawn is still going to be under attack. So let's just continue with knight d7. Let's just try to bring as many pieces out as possible before we play knight f6 and castle. Okay, immediate pawn to e5 should just be a free pawn though, because it's like counting. I have 1, 2, 3 pieces covering this square. He only has 2. Plus I could also just eliminate this knight. So let's just take on e5. If he takes, I could take the knight, then take on e5, or I could just take on e5 and I'm just going to be in an endgame where I'm ahead by a pawn because he gave it to me. So he took with the pawn, 1 defenders, 2 attackers. Let's just trade. And if he wants to trade the queens and the rooks off the board, I'm the one who is ahead by a pawn, so I don't mind. Okay, so he plays bishop to e2. I mean, definitely need to finish my development. But once I take on f3, to take is still a mistake, but taking on f3 will give him doubled pawns. So we're definitely taking on f3. If he takes with the pawns are doubled. And if he takes with the bishop and I takes, now the pawns are still doubled, which means I should be able to bring him into an endgame and win this. Okay, so he's basically deciding to trade the pieces off the board first before he takes the bishop, you know, which makes a lot of sense because maybe he thinks he's preventing me from castling, but little does he know that we're in the endgame. And castling is not important in the endgame. So my king activity is actually nice. Okay, what I want to do now is play pawn to c6 and then king to c7. Pawn c6, if he check, I just move. So let's play pawn to c6. Pawn to c6 also prevents his knight from moving forward. Like whenever you're playing against a knight or the opponent just has a knight on the chessboard, ensure that you're always aware of every possible moves forward that the knight could go. So he checks first. Okay. Let's play king to c8 and then rook to d8 threatens some nasty stuff. But I should be able to just play knight f6 and I'm fine. And then let's just play knight f6. Because now I'm guarding the back rank. And if he moves his knight to d7 or knight d5 should be fine. I'm ahead by a pawn and he has a very bad pawn structure. So bishop to c5. My pawn is under attack. Let's simply play rook to e8, guard the pawn, simple stuff. If rook to e1, then I should also be able to play pawn e6. Maybe I should have just played pawn e6. So rook to e1. First, let's play king to d7. If he check, I play king to c7. And then if he goes back to e1, then I play e6 or d5. And then my king is basically just gained a little extra tempo, you know. I move it just a bit closer in the center of the board. Okay, so he moves his king instead. Okay, I'm actually going to play pawn to e5 instead of pawn to e6. And then I'm going to try to play knight d5. And if he takes, I take with the pawn. And then the pawns are going to be very active in the center of the board. Okay, well, he's trying to trade the knights off the board, though. I mean, I don't want to trade because it undoubles his pawns. So knight d5, knight d6, there's rook here. Okay, let's play knight d5. I don't want to trade that knight. Maybe I could even give him the bishop and keep the knight, because whenever the opponent has a lot of weaknesses on the board, it's actually good to have a knight on the board because the knight is able to attack all those weaknesses. Okay, pawn c3 was played. Decent move. Now we hit him with pawn to f5. We start to kick away those knights. If knight d6, there's rook to e6, which attacks the knight. If knight g5, there's bishop h6, which pins the knight. So I am doing fine. Okay, he plays knight to g5. The bishop and the king is on the same diagonal. So let's play bishop h6, pinning the knight to the king. I mean, he's able to play rook to g1, so it's not like he's lost or anything like that. Pawn to h4 is also interesting. The issue is I'm not able to apply more pressure to that pinned knight. Okay, let's just play knight to f4. Like, my pawn on h7 is unprotected, but, he shouldn't be able to take it. Oh, or maybe he is able to take it. Because I was thinking about knight g2. Okay, he did the right thing. He moves his king off the same diagonal as my knight. But now I have a little idea. Give up the bishop for a knight. Give up the bishop for a knight. Then we play... Oh, shoot. Okay, let's play knight d6. Hit the bishop, hit the pawn. That's a fork. So I thought he could have taken... Oh, my God. He can. Well, if he takes on e5, I'm just not going to take the bishop. I'll take the pawn, and I'll still be ahead by a pawn. But that's a nice move. Checking is also interesting. But if he checks, I play king c8, and then his bishop is going to be under attack. So he took on e5, we take on g5, attacking his rook, attacking the weak pawn on f3, and we have a very strong pass pawn on the outside. I think I could say black is winning here. Like, I just have too many advantages. Pawn to f4, I'm expecting. Pawn f4, I just need to move my knight to safety, centralize my king, and then prepare to start roll my pass pawn. But he gave me another pawn, so we're going to take the other pawn. Now it's 3 pawns versus 1 pawn. Pawn h5 doesn't do anything. Let's roll the pass pawn up the board. Moving the king doesn't do anything. Okay, first I'm going to play king d7. And king d7 is just to prevent his bishop from going on this diagonal. Because I don't want it to be a case where his king is taking all my pawns and then I'm not able to queen. Now once he plays king up, I should be able to push and I should be able to queen. Because there's literally no way for the bishop to come on any one of these... Well, let's not use the word literally. But I should be able to prevent him in everything he tries. For example, if he puts the bishop here, I play g5. And if bishop b8, I play f4. And now I'm just going to queen. If he pulls the bishop back, I play g5. And then the bishop is not able to go to the f4 square. So bishop to a7, we play g5. Now if bishop to b8, we play f4. And I'm just going to queen my pawn on the next move. Now we play f4. What is he going to do now to prevent me from queening? There's nothing. But for 900... this guy didn't play too bad at all. And remember, if you want to play against me, just comment your username and your ratings and look out for my message. So he took a pawn. Let's just take on a4 first. Let's not allow him to have hope. Moves the king. Let's just roll the pawn. And he resigns. More modern defense against 1,000 players. Stick around. Our opponent is now 1,000. We're playing some more modern defense. Pawn d4, bishop goes to g7, knight c3, pawn goes to d6, knight f3. Now we play a6 with the whole idea of playing b5. And almost everyone is going to be playing like this. Like, the bishop is either going to be going to either c3 or d3. But this is the setup that most people are going to use. So he decides to put the bishop on e2. Let's continue with the plan. Pawn to b5. a3 to prevent pawn to b4. Let's go bishop to b7. We know what the plan is here. Knight d7, pawn c5, knight f6, castle the king. That's the whole entire game plan. Okay, usually it's not good to play moves like pawn e5 this quickly, but I'm not seeing how to punish it. If I take pawn takes, trade the queens off the board, not seeing what I get. But hey, let him waste time in the opening. I was planning on playing knight d7 anyways. So if he takes on d6, okay, how do I take back? If I take with the c pawn, then my rook gets the c file, and if I take with the e pawn, my rook gets the e file. Bishop to f4, very good. Now there's a little idea that I see Hikaru uses in the modern, where he puts his knight on the edge of the board deliberately, with the idea of putting his knight on the f5 square to target some d4 pawn. But usually pawn to g4 is an idea once the knight is on. So queen to d2. Okay, maybe I did something wrong. I'm not Hikaru, because now if I play knight f4, pawn g4, and the knight is just trapped, and if I take c takes, nothing changes. Okay, that was bad. That was bad. I'm not Hikaru. That was a terrible move. I have to pull my knight back to g8. So no, I just wasted like 2 moves. So I could actually be losing this game. He castled his king. Oh boy, I am not Hikaru. The issue is, how do I develop my knight? I don't want to waste too much time as well. Let's play knight to b6 here. I need to guard my pawn on d6. Like, if he takes, it would be very good for me, by the way. But eventually, I'm going to be developing my knight on f6. Maybe if he takes or something. But it's not an easy game for me. Like, he's a 1000 rated player, but he has a little GM thing beside his name. And guy's playing like a GM. Okay, pawn to d5. Another annoying move. But at least now I'm able to take on e5. And then it doesn't really matter which piece he takes with. I'm going to be able to develop my knight. Before, if I had taken on e5 and the pawn takes, I still can't develop the knight. So he decides to take with the bishop. No need to just take here. Let's just develop our bishop. If he wants to give up his bishop for a knight, which he actually really quickly did it. And what I've seen Hikaru done, he always take with the e-pawn whenever he gets the chance. Now, this is slightly risky because my king is in the center, which is why he played rook e1. I was expecting queen e3 check, but I'm right in time to get my king out the center of the board, and I could confidently say I'm chilling now. Pawn to f5 will get my bishop in the game. Pawn to h4, very strong move. Guy's playing like a GM. Let's play rook to e8, getting my rook on the open file. Pawn to g4, yo. This guy is trying to come for my king. Now, there's no attack on my king, to be honest. Like, there's this thing I want to tell you guys is, whenever someone is attacking on the king side, just counter-attack in the center of the board. And there's enough open files in the center of the board, so his attack on the king side is not gonna get through, basically. I'm hitting the unprotected pawn. Pawn to g5 I'm expecting. If pawn g5, I play pawn f5. My bishop becomes strong. Pawn to d6 is a strong move, but I'm not going to take and allow his queen to get the open file. I'm going to play pawn to c5. Now, he has to be careful because I could be possibly coming for his king. On the downside is, definitely has a pass pawn on d6, but my queen is blockading it, and I could definitely gang up on that pawn and win it. Okay, queen f4. Guards the pawn. Now the plan is to start ganging up on the pawn. So let's start by playing rook to e6. That's 2 attackers so far. The goal is to play rook to d8 so that way all my pieces are playing an attacking role on his d6 pawn. Okay, bishop back to f1. Interesting move. Let's just go rook to e8. Same idea. Well, the plan was to go rook to d8, but now he's trying to trade. So I want to be able to take with the rook and try to apply more pressure to this pawn. Maybe even bishop to f8 and then take the pawn. I'm just trying to attack that pawn with everything I have. And eventually, I'm probably going to play pawn to b4 and chase away this knight. And then, you know, my pieces are going to be able to come in and start an attack on his king. Okay, so he trade rooks. Let's take back on e6. I have 2 attackers. He has 2 defenders. Bishop back to f8 means 3 attackers. And I'm not seeing how he's going to add more defenders. I'm trying to play pawn to b4, but his queen on f4 is doing a great job protecting his pawn, protecting this pawn, preventing b4. Pawn to h5. I mean, my g6 point is actually pretty well guarded. So let's continue with the plan. Bishop to f8. Now we have 3 attackers. He has 2 defenders. How is he going to add an additional defender? I'm not seeing it. So I guess we're going to be winning a pawn finally. This 1000 player, he has GM beside his name. Definitely played very strong. So he took. Let's just take back. There's this file that is exposed on my king, but it's going to take him ages to get a queen and a rook over there. And even if a queen and a rook gets over there, I'm always going to be able to play bishop g7 and I'm fine. Bishop to e2. Okay, the knight is the only defender of the bishop. Am I able to chase away that knight? For example, take with the bishop. Well, he's just going to move the queen though. But then I play b4, hit the knight. Let's actually take with the bishop. I was planning on taking with the rook, but because of that move that he just played, we're going to take with the bishop. Because the knight is the only defender of the bishop. I'm attacking the queen. If I'm able to play b4 and chase away the knight, that's going to be a removing the guard tactic. And I could be winning a piece. Okay, queen h6 was played. Good move. Very good move. Because if pawn to b4, he ignores everything. Play rook h1 and I'm mated. Yo, why is this guy playing so strong? Okay, I'm going to fork him. I'm going to put my queen on c7 because I'm getting mad now. And I'm going to fork him on f5. You're 1000, bro. Play at your level. Queen to c7. I'm threatening a fork. I'm also threatening to sack my rook and then take on f3. But this little plan that he has to double up his queen and his rook on the h file and checkmate my king is a bit serious. But is he also going to see that I'm threatening this? Because, God, man, this guy. Oh, he saw it. He saw it. He moved the king. Okay, do we play queen f4 anyways? So that way, once the queen move, I could try to... I think my bishop belongs around here, though. That's the thing. So I think I should play bishop back to f8, actually. Chase the queen away that way. And now I have two threats. Sack my rook and then take on f3, or just play pawn to b4. Like, I'm sure black is better here. I'm ahead by a pawn and everything, but yo, the guy's 1,000, playing like he's a GM. So the queen went back to h3. So this sack is no longer working, but the knight is the only defender of the bishop. So once I hit him with pawn to b4, if he takes, move away the knight, I'm just ahead by a piece. If he ignores everything and play rook h1, I was expecting that because the guy's playing so strong. I now play bishop to g7. If he check, I move the king, and there's not going to be any more checks on my king. Damn. Okay, so he still decided to check. King to f8 is forced. No need to think about it. Still threatening this very strong removing the guard tactic. And I'm trying to be careful because this guy's been playing very well. But the good thing is, none of his pieces are able to move forward, which is why he resigns. But more modern defense against 1,100 players. Stick around. Our opponent is now 1,100. Let's play some more modern defense. So knight c3, bishop goes to g7, and then pawn goes to d6. And for the persons who are going to be asking in the comments, what's the difference between the Pirc and the modern? It's just that we're delaying the development of the knight on f6 for a while. Pawn to f4 is very interesting. Let's just play pawn a6 with the same idea. He's playing some Grand Prix type of setup. Whenever you see persons play knight c3, pawn e4, pawn f4, it's some Grand Prix type of business. So he plays the move knight f3, very natural move. Let's just play pawn b5, hit the bishop, forcing the bishop to move. Then we play bishop to b7, and we're already targeting his e4 pawn. So the bishop goes back to b3, bishop to b7 targets the e4 pawn. And the first tactic that I'm threatening is to play pawn to b5, chase away the knight, then take the pawn on e4, or just take the knight on c3, then take the pawn on e4. But it's actually very easy to just play pawn to d3 here. Queen to e2 also does it, because if I chase away the knight or take the knight, he's basically overprotecting the e4 pawn. So let's just play knight to d7 here with some ideas of playing knight c5, hit the bishop, and apply even more pressure to his pawn on e4. Oh my god. Is bishop takes f7 a brilliant move? I don't want to calculate it. Just let me know in the comment if bishop takes f7 was a brilliant move. Oh my lord. What if I play c5? Bishop f7, king f7, knight g5. If king e8, knight here, and that's a fork. If king here, I lose my queen. Ay, ay, ay. Ay, ay, ay. Let's play pawn to e6. Pawn to e6 is one of those moves in the modern as well. So that way we're able to play against this bishop. And again, I still have the decision of, do I want to put my knight on f6 or do I want to put my knight on e7? And for the other person who's going to be commenting, isn't this the hippopotamus defense? It is not, but it could be similar. And in some cases, it could transpose into the hippo. So the opponent decided to just castle the king, you know, very straightforward, makes a lot of sense. Let's hit him with pawn to c5. Not only am I attacking his pawn on d4 twice, I'm also threatening to play pawn to c4 and trap his bishop. So he decides to take, makes a lot of sense. Do I take with the pawn? Or no, if I take with the knight, I'm assuming my pawn on d6 is going to be weak. But I'm also threatening to play pawn to b4, so they're both good moves. Like, if I take with the pawn, this is just me trying to trick the guy and play pawn c4 and trap his bishop. So let's take with the knight. I have two pieces attacking e4. He has two pieces guarding e4, but there's two different ways to eliminate the main defender of his e4 pawn. Okay, rook to d8. Yes, the rook is on the same line as my queen. I could give up my bishop for the knight, then take on e4 and threaten this. I'm thinking of just playing pawn to b4 though. Hit the knight, force the knight on the edge of the board, then take the free pawn on e4. And that should be a clean pawn. So let's just play pawn to b4. These are basically the ideas in the modern. Hopefully you guys are able to see how I'm kind of delaying the development of my knight on g8 so that way my bishop is active. It also doesn't allow them to battery up and then put a bishop on h6 very quickly. And it keeps the knight flexible because now you could play both knight f6 or knight e7. So he puts his knight on the edge of the board. Let's just grab the free pawn. We have two attackers. He has one defender. So he plays bishop to e3, and I'm assuming he wants to put something on b6. For one, I can't do anything to prevent it, so let me just finish my development. I'm trying to just run my king out the center of the board here. Pawn to c3. Not too bad, not too bad. I mean, he's starting to take my pawn, so let's just take on c3 to not lose the pawn. The plan from here is just to get my king out the center of the board. Like, if he takes with the knight, I think it makes more sense to eliminate his knight, so that way once the pawn takes, the pawn is now weak, and I'm sure knight to e4 is just such a good move. I want to play knight e4. Okay, my king in the center of the board. Let's follow principles. Let's castle first. Let's castle first. Then I'm going to play knight e4. And then a c3 pawn is just going to be under too much attack. Pawn to h3 was played. He's probably trying to prevent my knight from going to g4. But let's continue with the plan, knight e4. The funny thing is, I have two pieces attacking his pawn on c3. He has 0 pieces guarding the pawn on c3, which means I will be capturing something. Okay, rook to c1. Now he has 1 piece guarding, but he didn't see that my bishop was there attacking the pawn as well. Now I'm going to take on c3, and that's a fork. So he has to sack his rook here or later, but he's going to be losing something. I want you guys to notice how in the modern defense, our 2 bishops, who is both fianchetto, is just cutting the board in half. And a lot of persons don't do well with bishops. So a lot of times, you're going to be able to use these bishops and capture a lot of free pieces from the opponent. Rook to c8 hits the bishop, but let's just pull the bishop back, to be honest. That didn't really do anything. I'm putting the bishop on f6 so that way I'm able to play king g7, but pulling the bishop back to g7 was also fine. Now he's pushing pawns on the side that his king is on, which is not recommended, by the way. Now, because I'm ahead in material, my goal is to trade some pieces off the board, so let's go rook to c8. I'm ahead by 4 points here. I'm just trying to trade. Pawn to g5, was expecting that. And, okay, let me just pull the bishop back. Like, I kind of get him to push pawns on the side that his king is on, so he's probably going to be getting some brutal checkmate. Like, that's the definition of a weak king, guys. Notice how the king looks castled, but there's no pawns in front of the king. Queen to d4, okay, and he just made a drawback blunder. I mean, what was the queen doing on f3? Protecting the knight. What is the queen no longer doing? It's no longer guarding the knight. So we just take the knight, and now we're ahead by 7 whole entire points. So he decides to trade rooks. Let's just take back the rook. I guess he wants my pawn on d6, but I'm going to be able to play rook to d8. So king to f2 was played. Like, I mean, I would just love to trade the pieces off the board here. But you know what? I'm not going to trade. Bishop e5 is nice, but let's play bishop b7. I want to play queen c6 and then start invading with my queen. And that should actually lead to a checkmate. So queen takes. Can't play queen c6 now because his queen is there. So let's play the move rook to d8 first. Look on my pieces. Every single piece is doing something. I played queen to b7. Now I'm still not able to play queen to c6. It's crazy. All right, what do we do here? How do we even win this game? Okay, fine. Let's play bishop to d5. Let's just do it the principled way and just trade the pieces off the board. So he took with the bishop, we take with the pawn, and then from here, we're just going to be rolling the pawn up the board. Why? Because passed pawns must be pushed. Taking on h3 is also a free pawn. My brain is not seeing any form of checkmates there, so I'm just going to continue rolling the pawn. Okay, he decides to sack the bishop. I'm going to take the bishop, but let's take on h3 with check first, because there's some potential for him to step his king on a dark square and then just immediately lose the game. Okay, king back was played. Not bad. Okay, fine. Now let's take the bishop. Let's just take the bishop. And then if he checks me in any way on the back rank, my bishop is able to block, and this should be leading to a checkmate. So check, we block with the bishop. Okay, let's go queen to f3, and this is the mate coming. Moves the king, queen to d2 check. Now I'm trying to take on f4. Look at this. He's attacking the f4. He's defending the f4 pawn twice. I'm only guarding it twice. We're still taking on f4. Because if he plays queen takes f4, the queen and the king is going to be on the same diagonal. My queen covers the d6 square, which means if I hit him with bishop to d6, his queen is actually pinned. Maybe he thinks my queen is hanging, but that's not possible. Now he just has to lose his queen. So he took. Now let's just take here. The opponent resigns. More modern defense against 1,200 players. Stick around. Our opponent is now 1,200 100, we're playing some modern defense. D4, the bishop goes to G7. Knight F3, we play D6. And we know what the next move is. Doesn't matter what they play. We're playing A6 followed by B5. Bishop D3, we play A6. If he castle, if he plays Knight C3, we play B5. H3 is actually weird because our plan is not to play bishop to G4. We're going to play B5 followed by bishop to B7 and apply pressure to the E4 pawn. With that being said, if you're a Pyrrhic player and you're playing the Pyrrhic defense, this is also a plan that you can adopt if you do not find any good scores for your light scored bishop. So bishop E3, bishop goes to D7, apply some pressure to the pawn. Knight D7 is coming. Knight D2, let's go Knight D7. Pawn C5 is coming. Okay, pawn to C3, let's continue with our plan. Pawn to C5, just to get some space on the queen side. Eventually, we're going to be playing moves like Knight F6 and castle. And if he takes, I take, Knight hits the bishop, and we apply a lot of pressure to his E4 pawn. Okay, pawn to D5 is, you're going to see pawn to D5 a few times. Let's just play Knight to F6 here, get the king out the center. And once we play pawn D6, if they take, their E4 pawn is still going to be under attack. So the opponent castled their king. I'm also going to be getting my king out the center as well. Pawn to A3. To me, that's an unnecessary pawn move. It was not needed just yet. Let's play pawn to E6. Let's get dynamic. His pawn on D5 is massively under attack. Once he takes and we takes, all our pieces are, well, I'm not going to say all. I mean, the rook on A1, A8 isn't doing much. He plays pawn C4, which is decent. Usually when they don't take, we're always going to be taking on D5. With that being said, the modern defense can be transposed into the Benoni, the Pyrrhic, the Kid, the Hippo, the Dragon. Like once you play the modern, it can always be transposed in those lines. So he took with the C pawn, decent move. Now we play rook to E8. That's one rook that is active. And then maybe rook to C8 doesn't really activate the rook unless I'm trying to play C4. Yeah, let's do that. Let's play pawn to C4, hitting this bishop, so that way my knight is able to get to the C5 square and attack this weak pawn. And okay, we know that we don't allow pieces on our half of the board, so we're definitely going to be hitting him with pawn to H6, forcing the bishop out of our half of the board. Then we can think about some knight C5 ideas, attacking this target on E4. So bishop goes back to H4. Decent move. First, let's play knight C5. We have 1, 2, 3 attackers on E4. He has 1, 2 defenders on E4. So he needs to add additional defenders on his E4 pawn. Otherwise, I'm going to hit him with G5 so that way my knight is no longer pinned. Then take on E4 and I'm just winning the game. But then he decides to play queen to E2, which, my fellow viewers, is actually a mistake. Because yes, he adds additional defense to the pawn, but he puts his queen on the same line as my rook. Now, because his queen is on the same line as my rook, it means his pawn on E4 is pinned. And because the pawn on E4 is pinned and pinned pieces does not protect, we're able to take the pawn on D5, knowing if he takes our bishop, we're just going to take on E2 and black is better. Okay, so he plays rook to E1, and here's what I'm seeing. 1, 2, 3 attackers. Well, 1, 2, 3, 4 attackers. 1, 2, 3, 4 defenders. But the queen shouldn't be in front of the rook, so that actually shouldn't count as a defender. So first I'm going to play pawn G5, chasing away the bishop so that way my knight on F6 is no longer pinned, and then we should be able to take on E4. Bishop G3, knight takes, bishop takes, rook takes, and that's another pawn. Bishop back to G3, and as we spoke of, knight takes E4 is just more material because now we have enough pieces guarding, and if the rook was behind the queen, then maybe it would have worked. But once he takes, I'm just going to take. It doesn't really matter how I do it. Once the bishop takes, I'm just going to take. Maybe I'm going to take with the bishop though, so that way I have some discovered attacks on his queen. Okay, he moves his queen out the way. It's actually not a bad move because my bishop is under attack. And if I take his bishop, he takes my bishop. So it looks like I have to just go back. What if I pull the bishop back? Pull the bishop back, takes, bishop takes. Let's just pull the bishop back. There's a little idea for him to win a pawn, but it's going to damage his king side. For example, he's targeting D6 twice. I'm defending it twice. So he could first take the knight, and then when I take, he take on D6. But, okay, I thought I could have took here. But then he's able to take here first and then take with the queen. But instead, he played rook to b1 because his b2 pawn was also hanging. So let's play queen to b6. Tricky move. Because I was actually about to take the bishop, but then I'm like, well, what if I just pin the pawn? Like, if I pin the pawn, I'm threatening to take the bishop for free. So he has to be careful. And now I'm not worried about him taking my knight because his rook is going to be attacked on b1. Okay, rook to e3 was played. That's actually a good move. Let's just trade. Let's just take the bishop. He has to first trade rooks, by the way, because if he takes on e3, he loses the rook. So first he has to trade rooks. Oh my God, he blundered because the pawn on f2 is pinned. It's crazy. I just set up the tactic and then, because I thought because he puts the rook on e3, he's going to be able to take. But look at this. It's pinned. We're now ahead by just 5 clean points. This is GG's. It's winning. It's over. Okay, queen to d2 actually concludes the game. Remember what I told you guys about attacking pawns around the opponent's king? My knight covers the e2 square. So now I'm able to play rook to e2. My rook is on the second, hitting his queen, and I'm threatening to take on f2. Kinda has to sack his queen, because if he simply moves his queen away to like any other random square, we take on f2, and that's gonna be a checkmate. Okay, so he decides to sack the queen. Let's just take and hit the king. King moves, we take another pawn, and I'm expecting resignation. But if he doesn't resign, this is going to be a checkmate anyways. Now he's just giving away material. Let's just take the bishop. This is him giving up. Maybe he's going to sack his knight here, and I'm just going to take it as well. He plays pawn to a4. Now, the knight is like the only piece that is guarding his king. So let's just eliminate the knight. And if he takes my pawn, then he should be checkmated in like the next 2 moves. Yeah, this is just checkmate in like 3. We check on f6. No, that would have been embarrassing. No mating 3. That's just a checkmate in 1 move. So that's just a checkmate. More modern defense against 1,300 players. Stick around. Our opponent is now 1,300. Let's hit him with some modern defense. Pawn d4, bishop goes to d7, pawn c4, bishop goes to d6. This is very interesting. Pawn f4. The guy's coming with a 4-pawn attack. Okay, this is against the 4-pawn attack. I have to regroup. I can't be playing slow moves like a6, because after a6, I'm also not able to play b5. So let's play knight c6 here and start immediately attacking his center. If he plays pawn d5, should be able to jump my knight into his d4 square. Now, one thing that you guys need to keep in mind is whenever someone pushes these pawns, it's actually very, very aggressive. But you have to keep in mind, every pawn move creates a weakness. So if he carelessly pushes these pawns up the board, he could be creating some weaknesses in his position. Now I go knight d4. The plan is to play pawn c5. Like anything attacks my knight, I'm going to play pawn c5. For example, bishop e3, pawn c5. And if he takes en passant, I take with the knight and my position should be fine. Okay, knight to f3 though. Knight f3 should give me enough time to play bishop to g4, pinning his knight to his queen. So if he takes my knight, I take his queen. I'm not afraid of queen to a4 check. Bishop to d7 hits the queen. Maybe he goes bishop to e3 or bishop to e2. Bishop to e2 is fine, but I mean, the goal was to trade off this knight anyways. If he's going to give me the bishop here this early on in the game, then I'm taking it. I just need to ensure that my king is castled safely. Okay, knight to d2 was played. That's a nice move, by the way, because if once I take, he's going to take back with the knight. But let's actually play knight to f6 here. Let's develop the knight. My knight is unprotected, but he's still pinned. And if he tries to play queen to a4, I hit him with bishop to d7, then I take on f6. And my plan is to castle my king. Okay, we saw this. Queen to a4, we block with the bishop, hit the queen. Queen now has to move, and then we take on f3. And the funny thing is, you know what the funny thing is? After we take on f3, if he decides to take with his knight on d2, he's going to lose the pawn on e4. I tell you, pushing the pawns up the board is very aggressive, but pawns don't go back, bro. So, I mean, I'm assuming he has to just go out. Okay, queen all the way back to d1. And then if I take on f3, he takes with the queen. Yeah, that's a better way to do it. So queen all the way back. I take on f3. He takes with the queen. If he takes with the knight, he loses a pawn. He took with the knight. Come on, bro. This is drawback. You were the guy who beat me in that Italian video. But that's just a pawn. Okay, there's this unprotected piece, but nothing else. That's just a pawn. I'm now just going to get my king out the center of the board. You push the pawns up the board aggressively, they're going to be falling one by one. Okay, bishop to d3 hits the knight. We have to do something about that. Let's just play knight back to c5. Offense is the best defense. Counter-attack the bishop. And then once the bishop moves, we get our king out the center of the board. All the minor pieces are doing something, which means it's time to get our major pieces in the game. So let's play pawn to e6. Nice little pawn break in order for us to open the e-file so that way our rook is able to take part on the e-file. Okay, rook to e1 was played. He's already trying to get his rook on the file. If I takes, he plays pawn takes. No need to rush though. Let's play rook to e8 as well. So we're both going to be trying to challenge each other to get control over the file. If he takes, I should be able to take with the bishop and attack his unprotected pawn. Otherwise, I'm also thinking of queen to f6 just to connect my rooks. Slowly bringing all my pieces in the game, and every one of my pieces, well, not all of them. This rook is not really doing much. That queen is also not doing much. So rook to b8 was played, and I know exactly why he played it. He wants to play b4 to attack my knight. So I'm going to play the move pawn to a5. This is called prophylaxis. This is basically seeing what the opponent is trying to do and then preventing it. So now he's still able to play b4, but I'm going to take, and he's not going to be able to chase away my knight. Okay, bishop to e3 hits the knight. Nothing that I'm afraid of though, to be honest. So let's just continue with the plan. First, I'm going to take on d5 so that way my rook gets the file. And then assuming he takes with the pawn, I play queen f6. And I'm just going to put my queen on f6 so that way if his bishop takes on c5 and I take back, I have the bishop here and my rooks are going to be connected. But he decides to play immediate bishop takes c5. Wasn't expecting that, but let's just take back. I mean, if he's trying to give me the bishop here that easily, then I'm going to take it. And then he's trading. Why is he trying to trade so many pieces off the board? I don't understand. He's the one who is down in material. Let's just take with the queen. Queen to e3 check is now hitting the unsafe king and the unprotected pawn at the same time. So queen to e3 check, that's called a fork. We talk about this. How do we find the best move? Look for moves where you put a piece on the opponent's half of the board. These moves are usually your checks, your captures, and your threats. Your ability to spot weaknesses, your ability to spot more than one weaknesses will help you to become a good chess player. What are weaknesses? Unprotected pieces, exposed king, a king that is not castled, a castled king with all the pawns that are pushed up the board. When you have a bishop and it's on the same line as the opponent's queen, that's a weakness to him, not to you. That's a strength. Those little ideas. So queen e1 applies some pressure to my pawn on a5. I want to play rook to e1, but I'm able to notice that that would be a drawback mistake because my pawn is going to be left unprotected. So let's just, okay, do I still do it though? And then play rook e2, hit the bishop? Do I play bishop h3 here? Now let's just play a5. Let's not rush it. I'm already ahead by a pawn. You know, he's just going to continue to beat himself. I don't want to be playing a position where I have too many weaknesses. For example, this is unprotected, this is unprotected, this is unprotected. That's already too many unprotected pieces. My goal from here is to ensure that I'm able to coordinate these pieces together, because the moment you have unprotected pieces in your position, that's when tactics is going to come. Okay, pawn to b3 was played. And okay, if I take, it opens the file for my rook. But let's just play rook to e8. That was the whole idea. Getting my last piece in the game. Putting pressure on the opponent's queen. You look on the position. Every single piece is doing something. That should be your goal. So the queen went to a5 anyways. Okay, c7 is actually not unprotected. c5 is unprotected. I want to hit him with rook e2. It's a nice move. Rook e2 hits the bishop. Bishop back, we take. If he check, I block. Yeah, let's do that. Let's play rook to e2. Bishop back to d1 looks like the best move. After bishop to d1, I should be able to play queen e4. Because if he takes my rook, I should be able to take his rook. That's an idea. And I want to trade. I'm the one who is ahead in material. Especially if he decides to check me on a1 and I block with the bishop. Once the queen is on e4, I'm also going to be threatening some back rank ideas. Okay, I got my revenge. You remember that game in the Italian where I blundered my queen against him and I had to resign and everyone was laughing against me in the comment? Look at this. Same guy decided to blunder his queen. Now he has to resign. And he resigns. But more modern defense against 1400 players. Stick around. Our opponent is now 1400s. Let's hit him with some modern defense. Pawn g6. Knight f3, bishop goes to g7. We know the drill. We should know the drill by now. Pawn goes to d6. We're playing like a caro, cheesing people. a6, b5. Bishop goes to d3. We play a6. And then once he castles, we play b5. The plan is to play bishop b7, knight d7, c5, eventually put the knight on f6. Bishop to f4, decent move. The guy's developing and he's playing very principled. Let's continue to do the same. Knight c3, let's go knight d7. That's the whole idea. And then we're going to play pawn c5 and then attack his center. And okay, pawn a4 is a very, very good move. It's a good way to attack someone's pawn chain. But let's play pawn b4. That's how you respond to it, just by chasing the knight away. And the whole idea is once I play c5, it's a bit harder for me to play c4. And knight f6 now becomes a possibility though, because now I have two pieces attacking his pawn on e4. So, I mean, if he pushes, my knight gets the d5 score, but I'm expecting him to play something like knight to g3, to be honest. Pawn to d5. A lot of persons play pawn to d5, but just know, once the pawn no longer guards c5, now my knight gets the c5 square. And this bishop on d3 is, we don't really want this bishop. You only take this bishop if it's a case where you have to move your knight out the way. So he decides to play pawn c3, which is very interesting because I have two attackers here, but he's attacking this pawn, and if I take, the knight guards, and if I takes, he takes. Okay, let's play a5 and guard the pawn. If he takes, I takes, and his e4 pawn is still going to be under attack. Now, bishop to b5 check is somewhat annoying, but I shouldn't have any huge problems just playing king to f8, to be honest. Like, his pawn on e4 is going to be even weaker. Knight to d4. So he just doesn't want to defend the e4 pawn. That's a pawn, bro. Let's say we take the pawn. Bishop check, we move the king. Knight c6, that's a bit risky, I'm not gonna lie, that's a bit risky. Let me get the king out the center of the board. That's kind of risky. Okay, now he plays pawn to e5, and I'm definitely 100% sure that this is a pawn. That's a drawback mistake that he just played, because the pawn was guarding d5, it's no longer guarding d5. So once I take on d5, hit the bishop is also unprotected. Now both of my knights are attacking both of his bishops, and I'm targeting his pawn on c3 two times. He's only guarding it once. So, well, he decided to take on b4. Maybe he thinks, okay, if I take his bishop, he takes my knight. But there's this thing in chess called an in-between move, bro. And yes, I'm not going to take the pawn. Like, I want to take this free knight, this free bishop, but if I take his bishop, he takes my knight. So the in-between move is to first take the bishop on d3. Then once the queen takes, then we take the bishop on f4. And just like that, we're ahead by an entire piece. I'm also attacking his queen. And then once the queen moves, we're going to be taking on e5, and that's more material. But he decides to play queen to b5, attacking my unprotected bishop. But his queen and his rook is on the same diagonal. So once we hit him with bishop a6, the queen isn't the queen. No, the queen is not trapped, but he's losing an entire rook, because once he takes on a5, I take the rook, and it's a discovered attack on the queen. This is now GG. It's just over, unless he's able to play some. Oh, didn't see queen c6 or queen c6. But let's just take the rook. Now I should be playing chess ahead by an entire rook, and okay, now he's just trying to be kind. Like, I didn't pay this guy any money before the game to be playing like this, but I'm now just trying to trade pieces off the board. So pawn e6, I need to save my bishop, but knight to e2 check is very strong, because if the king takes my bishop, I take his knight, and then I just win back the piece. And if the knight takes my knight, my bishop takes, and we're just trading pieces off the board. So I'm ahead by now 8 points. Still trading pieces off the board. The knight takes, the bishop takes, attack his knight on f3. Black is completely winning. He took on f7. Let's just take back. It's a check. Knight to g5. Hits the rook. I want to sacrifice that rook, to be honest. Like, I'm ahead by so many material. I'm more interested in just getting the queens off the board. Like, if he takes my queen and then he takes my rook, I'm going to be playing ahead by an entire 2 bishops. And this is something that I talk about a lot. Like, if you're ahead in material by a lot, don't be afraid to give back material. So he took on c7. First, we're going to play rook to c8, putting my rook on that file. His back rank is also a bit weak, which means I should be able to take on b2 and attack his rook. So he moves the queen, but that's also another blunder, my fellow viewers, because the queen and the knight is on the same file, well, the same rank. So now I just need to hit him with rook to f5, hit the queen, hit the unprotected knight. Once the queen moves out the way, we grab the knight, and that's just more material. So queen to b6, let's just take the free knight. Yeah, this is resignable. He's rolling his pass pawn. Have to be careful about them pass pawns, but let's take on b2 and attack the rook. His back rank is still weak, so I'm trying to find some ways to distract his rook from off the back rank and then mate him on the back rank. So rook attacks my bishop. Okay, let's pull the bishop back to f3. Pin pieces don't protect, so I'm actually threatening to take his pawn on g2, and that could lead to some checkmates. And if he plays pawn to g3, I hit him with queen to d7, get the queen to h3, and then he's going to be getting a lowless checkmate. Pawn to g3, queen to d7. Now our whole idea is to infiltrate the light squares. Queen back to e3. That's a nice move, because if I play queen h3, he's going to be taking my bishop. But queen and the rook is now on the same file. Hit him with rook to e5, force the queen to move away, grab the rook. Well, queen h3, hit him with queen h3, and if queen f1, we hit him with rook to b1, and that just wins the entire game. Okay, he has a check on the king. Luckily, I'm able to block the check, hit the queen, and his rook is under attack, because I would have lost my bishop. So let's just block the check. It's the same exact thing. His queen is under attack, and once he takes, we take the rook, play bishop h3, or just play rook to c1. Like, everything here is just winning. So as we said, he moves the queen, get rid of the rook. Once the queen takes, we hit him with queen h3, and then we're going to hit him with rook c1 and pin the queen. And, it's probably going to resign, or maybe he's just going to play it out. Who knows? So pawn to f3. Pawn to f3 is change of plans. Like, this is winning the queen, but this is actually leading to mate. Bishop to d4, king h1, that's mate. Bishop to d4, if he blocks with the queen, that's mate. So this is just checkmate in 2 moves. He moves the king, but that's just a checkmate. More modern defense against 1,500 players. Stick around. Our opponent is now 1,500. Let's continue to play some modern defense. So pawn d4, we go bishop g7. It's crazy. We're going to be seeing the same thing. Pawn d6, and he's going to probably go knight c3, bishop c4, or put the bishop on d3. So knight goes to c6, we play a3. This is the whole idea of the modern. Bishop goes to d3, we play b5. Like, we're going to be seeing this the whole entire time, by the way. Bishop goes to e3. He's just trying to develop his pieces normally. Let's go bishop to b7, already applying some pressure to his pawn, and he decides to play an immediate pawn to d5, basically early pawn to e5. Now, let's continue with knight to d7, regular stuff. He castled, we play knight f6. There's now some knight g4 ideas. There's no b4 ideas. Now, queen to d2 was played. It's quite evidently that he's trying to put his bishop on the h6 square. So let me play the move knight g5, attacking his bishop and preventing his bishop from going to h6. I'm also trying to play pawn to c6, just to attack the opponent's center. Bishop f4. Eventually, I'm going to pull my knight back to e5. Yeah, let's play pawn to c6 now. Maybe I should have castled, but it's not going to make a huge difference. He attacks my knight. The knight is under attack. We pull the knight back to e5. And I'm assuming he's going to play bishop to h6. Then I'm going to get my king out the center of the board. Now, he kind of rushed it, to be very honest. Because now that he plays bishop h6, we know that offense is the best defense. And to find the best move, we should be looking on our forcing moves. So first, I'm going to be taking on f3 with check. And I'm checking the opponent's king. And the funny thing is, even after he takes back, I'm still not going to be defending against this. First, I'm going to play knight e5, because knight e5 is now threatening a fork on f3. So if he takes my bishop, he's forked and he's losing. Okay, so the bishop went back to e2. in order to guard f3. Now we simply get our king out the center of the board, and I'm not ahead in material or anything, but his king is just very exposed. He took on g7. Let's just take back on g7. I'm expecting pawn f4 here. He played king to h2 instead. Pawn f4 was definitely better. He needs to chase away my knight. For now, let's just take on d5 so that way I could activate my bishop a bit more. And then he decides to play knight takes d5. Now, it's very important that I play chess with all my pieces. And my bishop and my knight is doing okay, but can't really see what my queen and my rooks are doing. So I'm thinking of playing rook to c8. I'm thinking about neutralizing his knight, get my queen to the h4 square. But let's play rook to c8 first. It's very important that we play with all our pieces. So now I have 3 active pieces. I just need to find something for my f rook to do, something for my queen to do, and then all my pieces are going to be very active. Okay, pawn to c3 doesn't really do much. I'm thinking of playing pawn to e6, chase away the knight, and there's knight e3. Let's chase away the knight. There's one drawback of my move though, pawn to e6. I'm actually weakening my pawn on d6. So my pawn on d6 is now a backward pawn, so I have to be very careful. Once he moves the knight though, the plan is to move my queen away, swing my rook to d8, then all my pieces are going to be having a job, basically. Knight to b5, knight b4 I wasn't expecting. Kicking the knight doesn't really do much, and probably he wants to play knight d3 anyways. So if I play queen h4, there's queen d6, I'm down by a pawn, queen f4 check, then there's king g2. Then rook d8 hits the queen, queen moves, maybe rook d2, and then I'm going to have an attack. Let's go for it. Queen h4. It's very risky. My idea is to eventually play rook to d8 and guard the pawn, but there's also a trap here. Like after queen d6, queen f4, if king g8, then he loses the queen. So he plays knight to d3, and he's basically trying to trade pieces off the board, seeing that I'm attacking him. But whenever you're attacking someone, you shouldn't really trade too many pieces off the board. So I'm thinking of knight c4 to hit the queen, but the queen is just gonna move. Knight c4, maybe queen c2. It's not a bad move, to be honest. I'm also thinking of rook d8. All right, let's play knight c4 to keep the pieces on the board, seeing that I'm attacking his king. I just thought about f5, and f5 is actually a wonderful move because the goal was to play rook to d8, but that didn't do anything. Now if I play f5, I'm doing a pawn break, and I hope you guys know that pawn breaks is what brings more of our pieces into the game, especially our major pieces. So pawn to f5 immediately targets his pawn on e4, and if he takes, then his whole king is going to be weak. Okay, so queen back to c1 was played. Now we hit him with pawn to f5, and we're officially attacking. I'm assuming he's going to play pawn b3 trying to chase away my knight, but I could just take and counterattack his knight. And if he takes my knight, I take his bishop. So b3 I takes, and if he takes, queen takes, I'm hitting the bishop. I'm threatening checkmate on g2. Guy's in trouble. He's in real trouble. I think he needs to play queen to f4. Just trade the queens off the board. Give me the free pawn on b2 because the knight is no longer going to be guarding the b2 pawn. Let's see how he continues. Okay, immediate knight to f4 is interesting because there was actually queen f4 because if I take knight e6 is a check. But let's get fancy. What if I take on e4 still? Allow him to fork. Move the king. Allow him to take my rook. Take his pawn, hit the bishop. It's a bit too fancy actually. It's just a bit too fancy. Yeah, let's just play rook to e8 and guard the pawn. I don't want to be too fancy. Pawn to b3, I'm still going to be taking on e4 because I'm going to have 2 pieces attacking here. So he got rid of the knight, which makes a lot of sense. Let's just take back on c4. I'm attacking him, so he needs to eliminate the attacking pieces. So he's doing the right thing. And then knight g2 is also trying to neutralize my queen that is on his half of the board. But now I'm going to play queen h5, hit the unprotected pawn. And if he moves the knight, hit the queen, I take on f3. So let's first hit the unprotected pawn. Like, everything here is under pressure. So I'm expecting some form of queen move, but he could actually be blundering. Because after takes, if he plays queen e3, rook to f3 hits the queen. And then once the queen moves, there's rook h3, king h1, rook h1, mate. So, tricky stuff, tricky stuff. He did play queen to e3. So here's what's going to happen. I take on e3. He takes on e3. I play rook f3. He plays queen d4 check. I block with the pawn, force the queen to move, and then once the queen move, I check king move mate. Let's take on e3. This is GG's. Unless he plays knight f4, but queen e5, and the knight is just dead. So he took. We play rook to f3. We're now threatening checkmate in 2 moves, and we're attacking his queen. Okay, knight to f4 here. Now he needs to play knight to f4. God damn, did I blunder? Knight f4, if I take the queen, he takes my queen with check. Knight, oh my god. Okay, how do we get out of this? Queen e5, if he takes, I go rook f8. Or do I takes, queen takes, then rook f8, queen d6. Whoa, how did I not see that though? So rook e5, queen f3, rook f8, queen g3. Let's sack the rook. I didn't see that at all. Let's sack the rook. So once he takes, this is now under attack. I'm thinking rook f8, queen d6. Rook f8, queen d6, rook f3. And then he takes on e6. Okay, that's too risky. Okay, let's just play e5. I have an idea. I'm going to have to cheese him. Hikaru cheeses people as well. That was a very nice defense that he found. Like, I think he's going to want to play queen to g4. And if he plays queen g4 trying to trade the queens off the board, I'm going to respond with bishop takes e4 at the end. And I'm going to be down in material, but a bishop being here is going to be very strong. He didn't even fell for that. He played queen e3. So what do we do now? All right, let's go rook to... God damn, what to play? All right, let's go rook to f8. Pawn to f3. Now we play bishop to c8. Now I have 2 pieces attacking h3. He only has the king. And if he plays pawn to f4, I just take it the queen. Because pawn f4 defends the h3 pawn. I can't even rely on winning on time because the guy has more time than me here. So f4 we take. Rook takes loses because, well, it actually doesn't lose. He could actually play rook takes. Because all I'm going to get from this is a few checks. Unless after rook takes, there's queen e5, and then I pin the rook. So he has to play something like queen to d4 check here. And after queen d4 check, I'm going to move my king to h6. Very risky. But then his pawn on h3 is going to be under attack. Okay. So rook takes, I'm not going to take queen takes check because he's able to move. So instead, I'm going to play rook, queen to e5. Now I'm pinning the rook. And I'm already PPing on the pin piece. So even if he plays rook to f8 or king to g3, I'm going to hit him so hard with pawn to g5. And then I'm going to be winning. Whoa. So rook to f8. Now we play pawn to g5. PP on the PP. We must... What? Oh, rook takes. Once I play rook takes, I'm winning. Because if queen takes, that's losing. And if rook takes, queen takes, I'm ahead by a piece. That was scary. Because now my pawn is pinned. Okay, but let's just take. I'm just ahead by an entire piece here. So he took with the rook, still can't take with the pawn. But once I take with the queen, I'm also forcing the queens off the board. So this is actually GG's. Good game, bro. Good game. Okay, let's now just get our king in the game. He moves his king. Let's just play king up here. We're just going to be taking that pawn. Let's attack the weak pawn. This is completely winning. And the opponent resigns. More modern defense against 1,600 players. Stick around. Our opponent is now 1,600. Let's play some more modern defense. Pawn to g6. Pawn d4. Let's go bishop to g7. Whole idea. And pawn to d5. That's suspicious. You don't push the pawn again like that without attacking anything. Let's play pawn to e. Very suspicious. Let's play knight to f6 and attack his pawn on e4. Usually you don't develop the knight this early in the modern, but that was a suspicious move. And then the whole idea from here is to usually just target these pawns. So now I'm going to play pawn c6 and just keep targeting the pawn. He plays c4. Let's take the pawn on d5. And we're just going to continue to target the pawn. He take, now we play e6 and continue to target the pawn. It would be cool if I'm able to get my king out the center of the board though. So he took, let's take with the f pawn. So once I castle, my rook gets access to the f file. Knight f3, let's get the king out the center of the board. He also got his king out the center of the board. And from here, I imagine it's just normal development. Let's start by playing the move pawn to... Let's play pawn to b6, bishop b7, and try to apply some pressure to that pawn on e4. Pawn to e5. Was expecting that. That cannot be accurate though. Because, okay, this is something that will happen a lot in your games, by the way. Knight to g4. I have two attackers, he has one defender. So now he has to add an additional defender, and I'm going to add an additional attacker. Well, he didn't want any of that, so he just decided to blunder the pawn. That's just a pawn. There's no tricks here or anything. Let's just take on e5, and then once the knight takes, we take, and we're already ahead by the pawn. This is the whole idea. This is why we play the modern, just give them some control over the center, and then we just take it back and take their pawns. He needs to develop two minor pieces. I need to develop two minor pieces. He plays rook to e1, hitting my bishop, but offense is indeed the best defense. Queen to f6. Defend the bishop. Attack f2 two times. Attack b2 two times. Rook to e2. It's not bad, He guarded both of them at the same time as well. And now I just need to just get the rest of the pieces in the game. Let's just play knight c6. Like knight d4 hits the rook, bishop b7, put the bishop on a very nice file. There's also some knight b4 idea to hit his bishop. Like black is chilling here. Okay, bishop h6, not too bad. I mean, I should be able to take on b2. And if he takes my rook, I take his rook. Force the bishop to move, pawn g5. But I don't want to do all of that. Let's play rook f7. That's fine. Let's give him the little tempo, because pawn to g5 can also just trap his bishop and win me the game on the spot. Knight c3 was played, and this is what we were talking about. This bishop on h6 is now mine. Pawn to g5, there's nowhere for the bishop to go, and my queen is on the same line as the unprotected bishop. Hit him with pawn to g5, and I'm just going to be taking the bishop on the next move. Now, he could try to make it tricky, playing something like bishop e4, and if I take his bishop, he takes my knight, then take back the bishop. But if bishop e4, I should just eliminate this knight, then take the bishop, and we're not going to only be ahead by a pawn. We're going to be ahead by an entire piece. Knight to b4 didn't do anything. There's no good forward squares for that knight. So let's just take the unprotected bishop, unless he's trying to sack his rook and then play knight d6, which just doesn't do anything. Bishop to e4, that's the idea. He wants to take my knight and then take my bishop. But because offense is the best defense, do we play d5? And if he sack the bishop and then play... Yeah, let's play d5. If he sack the bishop and then play queen takes, my queen guards the knight, so shouldn't be losing anything. Ooh, queen to e2. Fancy guy, fancy guy. If I take his bishop, he takes my knight, hit the rook. Fancy guy. What if I hit the queen, though? If I hit the queen, he hits the knight. I take the bishop, he takes the knight. Okay, that's fine. Let's just play bishop to b7. Guard the knight. Your bishop is still under attack, and he's still forced to move his bishop out the way. Bishop back to f3, my fellow viewers. Can you spot the brilliancy that black is about to play? If you're able to spot it, in order to find good moves, look on moves on the opponent's half of the board. These moves are usually the checks, the captures, and the threats. There's no checks in this position, which means it's a capture. Capturing the bishop, sacrificing the rook. And then once the pawn takes, we're now able to hit him with queen takes h3, and he will be getting checkmated. His king is just too exposed. I have two pieces pointing towards the king. The bishop is ready to come in on the dark square, the light squares. The knight is able to jump in whenever. And if he sacked the rook, there's knight takes, and he's still going to be getting mated. So he plays rook to e3. If I check king over check, the king runs. Yes, I win the rook, but I'm trying to mate. If I check king over check, the king still runs. So let's be patient about what's happening. Let's play pawn to a6. Let's play pawn to a6, neutralize this knight, so that way my knight gets access to the d4 square. Which means, once his king starts running, my knight is going to come in. Or, I could just play knight d4 immediately. I play knight d4, which means I guard the e2 square. Like I could have check, king over check, king up fork. But if I play immediate knight to d4, then that's just winning a queen. Because if he tries to save the queen, that's just mate, because there's no king running here. And that's why he resigns. More modern defense against 1,700 players. Stick around. Our opponent is now 1,700. Let's play some more modern defense. Pawn to d4. the bishop goes to g7 and knight f3, we play pawn to d6. From here, I'm going to play pawn a6 followed by pawn b5. And this is the whole idea that you guys are learning about the modern defense. So bishop goes to d3. Here we play b5. Now I'm threatening some ideas of attacking his knight. The bishop is going to be going on b2, targeting e4. This knight goes to d7. He plays a3. Let's put the bishop on b7 here. And usually what I like to do is play knight c5, knight to d7, followed by pawn to c5. He castled the king. The knight goes to d7, not c6, even though knight c6 is usually one of the moves that could be played. And then he played rook to e1, which is a very interesting move because he's immediately getting his rook on the same line as my king. But let's just go ahead and play the move pawn to c5 here. Now I have two pieces attacking his pawn. He's only guarding it once. So usually from here, they just take on c5 and allow my knight to go to the c5 square and target his pawn on e4. So they take, let's play knight c5, hitting the bishop, targeting e4. Usually, a move like pawn to e5 is usually a move that, you could say I'm scared of. But bishop e3 doesn't really do much because now I get to simply develop my knight. That's now 3 pieces attacking e4. He only has 2 pieces guarding e4. If the bishop ever takes, my pawn is going to take and I'm fine. He's the one who's giving up his bishop for a knight. And if he plays pawn to e5 attacking my knight, I hit him with knight to g4, hitting the bishop and target the pawn on e5 at the same time. Okay, bishop to g5. I mean, we don't want to be moving the same pieces more than once in the opening like that, bro. Let me just get my king out the center of the board. Like, I was able to get a very nice opening. I mean, all my pieces are already doing something. Pawn to b4 is a nice move. Well, not really, because there's a drawback to pawn to b4. The knight is now unprotected. I mean, yes, my knight is under attack. I'm definitely going to be taking a bishop. So usually that's when we take that bishop. Like, we're not going to immediately rushing to take the bishop on d3. But if they try to chase away our knight, that's when we take the bishop. And then he decides to take with the pawn. So that way his center is intact. But from here, it's just a matter of bringing all my pieces in the game. And let me start by playing pawn to h6. Let's chase away this bishop. This is me applying the principle of neutralization. This is me just ensuring that the bishop is no longer on my half of the board, and he gave up his bishop for a knight. Now I have 2 very strong fianchetted bishop versus 2 knights, and then the guy played knight d5. Who is this guy's coach? Maybe he's trying to do some form of exchange sacrifices, but it doesn't work like that. Like, what first I'm gonna just take, well, it doesn't matter how I do it. Like, it really doesn't matter. I could first take the rook, then take the knight, or take the knight, then take the rook. In fact, I'm actually gonna take the knight first, because if he moves the rook away, I get to move my bishop away, and I'm ahead by a piece. If he takes my bishop, I take his rook, and just like that, I'm ahead by an exchange. It doesn't mean I'm clearly outright winning, but this is just good for black. Now I just need to ensure that my major pieces joins the game as quickly as possible. Because rooks needs files, let's play rook to c8, put the rook on the file. Pawn to h3 didn't really do much. Let's play queen to d7, connecting the rook. The plan is to play moves like queen b7 or queen f5 to target this pawn on d5. But I still need to be careful because if I move the queen on f5, there is a drawback. Knight to d4 is a very strong move, very, very strong move, because he's trying to get his knight onto the c6 square. But I have something for that. If once the knight goes to c6, I'm going to play pawn to e6. And if he takes, I take the knight. If the queen goes to f6, I just take, and the knight is going to be under attack. So rook c7, knight c6, pawn e6, queen f6, take the pawn. And if knight e7 check, maybe I need to play rook to e8. Rook e8, knight c6, pawn e6, queen f6, take on d5, knight d6 now. Okay, let's just go rook to c7. Once I'm able to play pawn to e6 safely, I should not be losing. Or maybe pawn to no, pawn to e5 doesn't make any sense. Unless I'm going to sacrifice. Pawn e6, queen f6, pawn d5, knight e7, king h7, knight d5 hits the rook. Yeah, that's kind of scary, to be honest. Let's just play pawn e5. That's kind of scary. Now, if he takes on e6, he loses the knight. With that being said, I am likely going to be sacrificing my rook for the knight. And because I'm ahead by an exchange, sacrificing the rook for the knight is going to mean I'm only going to be ahead by a pawn. But That's usually, I don't remember the GM who said it, but he said something along the lines of, I think it's Capablanca. If you're ahead by an exchange, your plan should be how to sack that back exchange to get into a position where you're ahead by a pawn and in a winning endgame. So that's the rule that I'm going to use here. But pawn d4 was just a nice move. He's now finding, all of a sudden, he's just finding some nice moves. Okay, maybe I need to take. Let's just take. If he take with the knight, then at least I don't need to sack. If he takes with the queen, then I'm going to sack. So he took with the queen, takes. Or maybe play rook here first. Yeah, let's trade off. Let's trade off one pair of rooks off the board first. Because I don't want his rook getting on my second rank. Like, we're probably gonna sack back, but let's be patient about it. Maybe he makes a mistake before I even get the chance to sacrifice. Okay, so we traded rooks. Let's just take back. There's some ideas of checking, but once the king move, I have nothing. My whole plan here is just to takes. But then he plays queen to b6 though. That's such a good move. He's attacking my unprotected rook and he's attacking a6. This could be very well losing, but I have a plan. I'm going to play rook e7, sacking my rook, and if he takes, I takes. This pawn is going to be unprotected, and once the queen takes the pawn, I check his king. Once the king move, I go back to e5 and check the king, and then once the king move again, I take on d5, guarding both of my pawns, and I should try to play for a win there. So let's go rook to e7, and I'm going to have a pass pawn basically. So let's take, and then once the queen takes, I'm gonna check, go here, and then take. I don't know how I made this happen, but this should be an interesting endgame. But I'm gonna try to do one of those Magnus grinds. Like, I'm gonna have a pass pawn, he's gonna have a pawn majority. So I check, king move, don't take this pawn because both of my pawns are hanging. So I check again, force the king to move somewhere, then I take this pawn to protect both my pawns. Yeah, he blocks the check like that. Now let's take. And now it's just a matter of who is able to push their pass pawns up the board the quickest. He needs to play a5 quickly. And I need to move my queen in front of the pawn and push my pawn quickly. Anything could happen here. Ooh, pawn to a4 on the board. Ay. Queen to d4. Pawn takes, and that's a draw. I don't want to draw this. It's going to be hard to win, though. But let's take. Let's take queen takes. Then I play queen d4. And that's going to slow him down. The whole idea is the person who is able to push their pawns first will win this game. It's going to be hard. I'm sure this is probably drawn, but I'm going to try to apply a lot of pressure to him. Like, now he has to notice that I'm attacking this pawn, which he did. And then now I'm going to start rolling my pass pawn. Every chance I get, I'm going to be pushing this pawn up the board. Now, when it comes to queen ending, it's very important that your queen is a very versatile piece. You want to ensure that your queen is able to give checks to the opponent's king, protect your pawns, attack the opponent's pawns, and it needs to be doing all of this at the same time. Usually, it's best to centralize the queen in the endgame. Now, queen to b4 is just very strong. He's just putting the queen behind the pawn so that way he's able to roll the pawn up the board. Now there's queen c4, takes, push, queen with check. So let's go queen c4. That's a nice move. He's not able to trade queens because I'm going to queen with check and queen one time before him. So me playing queen to b4 is actually gaining a little tempo here, but he just needs to pull the queen back. And if he pulls the queen back and I push, he's going to push. Queen c3, he pulls the queen back again, I push, he's going to push. Yo, this is weird. It's weird. It's hard. Oh, that's losing, bro. He traded. Oh, fruit juice. His king is in the square. I didn't see that. His king is in the square. This is probably losing for me then. I have to now get my king in the square. And he's the one with the outside pass pawn. Okay, this is probably losing. Oh, shoot. If he push, I go here. If he push, I take. And if he takes, I go here. Oh, yeah. Now I go here. He push, I take. Okay, he needs to push. What? The guy, why didn't you push the pawn? And then if I take, you take, and then king here, and then I'm going to try to win the game. You just blundered the pawn, bro. Guy was playing so well. This is now winning. This is now fox in the chicken coop. 3 versus 3. Let's just play f5 to freeze his pawns. And then I'm just going to use this pawn to distract his king. And then I'm going to run my king over here. Yeah, let's just play h5. Now his pawns are frozen. That's crazy. Okay, now I just need to use this pawn to distract his king. Okay. Oh, king up was actually winning. What am I doing? Okay, once he moves the king, okay, king up is also winning. Usually when you have to step away from the pawn, it's best to go straight back because now once I push, we're in the key position. King d2 forces king to move my pawn, and okay, this is GG's. Okay, so the king move, now we're just gonna checkmate his king. Guess he's trying to see if, well, he resigns. But more modern defense against 1800 players. Stick around. Our opponent is now 1800. Play some more modern defense. Now, after e4, we're going to be playing the immediate pawn to g6. d4, we put the bishop on g7. And then once they play their move, we play pawn to d6. This is the whole idea. And then pawn to a6. Now, I don't want you guys to say I'm making a lot of unnecessary pawn moves. You know, maybe you could say that. But the idea of a5, as we've been talking about, is to play b5. And then it comes with a lot of ideas of attacking the knight. I can also play bishop to b7 and target the pawn on e4. So knight f3 was played. First, let's put the bishop on b7, which means already we're threatening or removing the guard tactic. So he plays bishop to d3, which means if I attack the knight, his pawn on e4 is already going to be guarded. I'm thinking about playing knight f6 to just further apply more pressure, but you should be able to get out of this very easily. I want to play knight d7 followed by c5, because once I play c5, it comes with a lot of attacking potential to attack his pawn on e4, to play c4 and attack his bishop. So he castles his king. Let's play pawn c4. And one thing I want you guys to keep in mind is my king should be safe. So even though I'm not immediately castling my king, like how he's castling his king very early, like my king is safe. Like he has to really get rid of all the pawns in the center of the board if he wants to get to my king. Now that he takes, I'm going to take with the knight. That's the whole idea. And now we're applying a lot of pressure to his center, basically. And now he plays a3, which means I'm not able to play pawn to b4. But now I'm going to play knight f6. Finally develop the knight to f6. We have 3 pieces attacking e4. He only has 2 pieces guarding e4. So he has to play a nice move. Bishop takes c5. He's basically getting rid of one of the attacking pieces. Let's just take on c5. And in a lot of cases, I could play pawn c4 and then just chase away the bishop. So now he plays rook to e1. And I'm suspecting that he's going to play e4 and attack my knight. But my knight should be doing fine on d5. So let me just finally get my king out the center of the board. And pawn e5, knight d5, pawn e6, slightly scared of that. But apart from that, I'm just chilling. So he puts the rook on the file. The guy's playing very actively, by the way. If you notice, he's ensuring that all his pieces are active at all times. So now I need to get a rook on this file. I'm thinking queen c7. Pawn e5, knight d5 could be an issue. Okay, let's play pawn to e6. So that way, if he attacks the knight goes to d5 and there's no pawn to e6. Pawn to b4, that's very suspicious. Because one thing I could do is play pawn c4 and attack his bishop. But I could also just take on b4. And then once he takes on b4, that's now an unprotected pawn. So I get a weakness to work with. Now I'm going to play the move queen e7 and attack his unprotected pawn. Anytime he plays pawn e5, my knight gets the d5 square. And the plan for my rooks is simple. One open file on the D file, one open file on the C file. So I like my position. He's now pulling his pieces back. That should be a good sign. If you notice your opponent is pulling their pieces back. Now let's go rook to D1, putting our rook on the same line as the opponent's queen. Okay, he moves the queen off the same line as the rook. Like this guy's playing some chess though. Now I'm trying to set up some tactics here, but I'm not seeing it working. So let me just get the rest of my pieces in the game. I could confidently say all my pieces are now doing something. I need to target his e4 pawn and his b4 pawn. My rook is still on the same line as his queen. And remember, guys, if you want to play against me, leave a comment with your username and your ratings, and I'll send you a message. Okay, he's pulling back more pieces. Love to see that. And just like that, my fellow viewers, our opponent made a blunder. Because why is he pulling his pieces back? He's scared. Like, he doesn't respect the fact that I just put my rook on the same line as the queen. And because I put my rooks on the same line as the queen, it means the pawn on c2 is pinned. And pinned pieces doesn't protect, which means the pawn is not guarding the bishop on d3. And we have said it. To find the best move, you look for moves on the opponent's half of the board. You look for checks, captures, and threats. And just like that, we won a bishop. Okay, he decides to take the rook, so let's just take the queen. And okay, this position is now completely winning. Like, I'm just ahead by, it's actually only 2 points, but it should be winning. Queen to d6 is not a blunder, it's a trick. It looks like it's a fork. Yes, I'm attacking his pawn on d3. If he plays pawn to e5 and fork my queen and my knight, then it allows my bishop access to his g2 pawn. And then I'm going to hit him with queen d5, threatening checkmate on g2, attack the unprotected knight on a2. Ha ha ha. He thought he was up to something. He thought he was onto something. But he got tricked. I told you guys, your ability to identify weaknesses in the opponent's position is what is going to help you to get better at chess. So for example, being able to know that in order to attack the opponent's king, you should attack the pawns and the squares around the king. If you're able to attack that and use more than one pieces to attack them, then you're just completely winning. Now, after takes, I'm just going to take. Yeah, this is not just winning. I'm ahead by 3 points. He moves the rook, but obviously we're going to be giving up the bishop for a knight because we want to trade. And, you know, once he takes, I'm going to just hit the rook and this is GG's. So he decides to take with the pawn. Let's go queen to d2, hit the unprotected rook, the unprotected pawn here, the unprotected pawn here. Okay, so he moves the rook to guard each other, but we spoke about this. Attack the pawns around the opponent's king. Now we have 2 pieces attacking his pawn on f2. That's just a check. Let's just move the king. And then he put the other rook on c7. But this, my fellow viewers, is just checkmate in 2 moves. We're just going to take on f2, check, forcing the king to move, and then queen g1 is mate. So let's take on f2 with check. The king now has to step over. That's a checkmate, but that's also a checkmate. More modern defense against 1900 players. Stick around. Our opponent is now 1900 and we're playing some more modern defense. Knight f3, we go bishop to g7. Remember, the bishop always go to g7. Knight c3, we play pawn to d6. And pawn d4, we play pawn to e6. This is the modern defense. The plan is to play b5, b4. For example, bishop goes to c4, hit him with b5. And then once the bishop move, we go bishop b7. And then all of a sudden, we're threatening some ideas of pawn b4, hits the knight, and then win the pawn on e4. Okay, knight to g5 was played. Whenever knight g5 happens, this little fried liver looking thing is happening, but just play pawn to e6. Like, there's nothing there. Is he going to sack his bishop and then knight takes, forking my bishop and my queen? I don't care. I'm just going to play queen e7, hit the knight, guard my bishop, guard my pawn, and I'm fine. So him putting the knight on g5 is just wasting time, to be honest. I'm going to play pawn to h6 very soon and just neutralize that piece from my half of the board. So he decides to castle the king. Let's play h6. Let's chase away that knight. And then once the knight moves out the way, then there will only be one defender of his e4 pawn. And then I'm going to play pawn b4, chasing away his knight. And then once the knight moves, we take on e4. Just like that, we're going to be playing ahead by a pawn. Same idea. It works in the modern defense. The bishop attacks the pawn, the knight guards the pawn, removing the guard. Pawn to b4, chases knight away, grab the pawn on e4. Knight goes on the edge of the board. We take the free pawn, and then from here, it's just development. The rook is attacking the bishop. Let's just play knight f6, develop the knight, guard the bishop. It's very important that we complete our development here. And I'm also trying to get my king out the center of the board. Now, he could try to play this move, pawn to d5. But if he plays d5, I'm just going to play e5 and then just close the position. But my next move is just going to be castle. Like I told you guys, it's the whole idea in the modern defense where we're playing it like Hikaru. Okay, pawn c3 is a very nice move because it immediately targets my pawn, and I'm thinking about playing knight c6 to develop and defend it, but pawn d5 is very annoying. Okay, let's just play a5. I want to keep his knight on the edge of the board. So if he takes, I takes. It's hard for his knight to escape. And I was kind of worried about something like bishop to d2 and attack my unprotected pawn. But I should be able to just put my knight on the edge of the board and guard it. So bishop to c2 was played. Now, if I take, queen takes, I should be able to just quickly run my king out the center of the board and everything is fine. So let's do that. And the good thing is I'm ahead by a pawn. Like, that's the whole idea of everything. So now I castle my king. And the other funny thing is I'm also very close to finishing my development. So he's like one move away from completing his development. I'm like one move away from completing mine. Okay, bishop goes to e3, developing the bishop. It's probably some ideas of playing queen to d2. Let's just go, Yeah, let's play knight to d7 here. Let's just develop normally. Like, I wanted to play knight a6, but no need to do all of that. He plays pawn b3 to guard the knight, and now I just need to continue slowly improving my position. Knight d5, centralizing the knight, hit the bishop, target the weak square on c3, and very importantly, I'm also protecting my weakest pawn on c7. So the bishop decided to go back. We just want to continue to improve our position. That's all. What piece do I have that is not doing much? How do I put this piece on a better square? And let's go queen to c8 here. That's my conclusion. Queen isn't doing much, and I also want to get this rook in the game. Okay, he pulls his queen back to c1, so he has two pieces attacking h6. I only have one piece guarding h6, so let's play king g7, guarding the pawn on h6, and then the plan is to play queen b7 or queen a6. Definitely a better square for my queen. Pawn h4 is very aggressive, by the way. I think he wants to play pawn h5 and expose my king. So let's play knight to f6, preventing him from playing h5, and it's also very easy for a knight to get to the g4 square. So we're still outplaying him. There's not a lot of weaknesses in my position, and I'm going to put my queen on b7 or a6. Okay, now that he plays pawn a3, the queen is definitely going on b7, protecting my pawn. We're not taking on a3 because it helps his rook, but if he takes, I'm going to be able to put my knight. Okay, that was a blunder. Because after takes, bishop takes, queen takes, there's queen takes c7. And he will be, well, he's not going to be ahead by a pawn, but he basically got back his pawn. It's one of those pawns that is easy to retrieve, though, because after takes, no, he needs to play pawn takes. If he starts with bishop takes, that's bad, because there's immediate knight d5. But if pawn takes, I can't take immediately. Like, first I'm going to guard the pawn on c8, then I try to take on b4. Okay, queen c2, he missed it, so now let's take on a3, seeing that that's an idea that I didn't see. And then once the rook takes, I play rook to b8. Now tell me, my fellow viewers, what piece do I have that is not doing anything? This is how you should be playing chess. Like, I'm talking to all my students and they're asking questions like, when should I attack the king? You know, when should I go for the pawn break? But first you have to ensure that all your pieces are on good squares. Put all your pieces on good squares first. Okay, rook to b1 was played. How can I possibly improve this position? Knight to g4 is an idea. There's knight b4. Can't sack the rook because the rook is there. There's knight b4 hits the queen. Yeah, it's knight b4 hits the, wait, knight b4 takes, queen takes, take the rook, and then if he takes here, I should be doing fine. So let's just go knight b4, hit the queen, and if he give up his bishop for a knight, that's good for us. If he doesn't give up the bishop for a knight, then my other knight could get the d5 square or even the e4 square. So let's take, hit the unprotected rook, which means my pawn on c7 is hanging, but it's poisoned. He's not able to take it. Okay, that's interesting. I wasn't expecting him to protect the rook. I thought he was going to move away the rook. Like, sacrificing my rook shouldn't work because he's not going to take with the pawn. He's going to take with the rook. And if I take, he takes. And then once I take, his other rook is going to take and I'm just lost. But I'm going to continue to improve my position. Let's play knight d5, centralizing the knight, also keeping this knight on the edge of the board. Now his knight is not able to move. Because, well, for one, my knight is covering the square, but two, if the knight moves, he loses the rook. Queen b2 was definitely inaccurate. And he's putting his queen on the same diagonal as my bishop, which means now I'm able to play moves like pawn to c5. And what pawn to c5 does it basically pp on the pp. Okay, rook to a1, odd move, because both of his rooks are now guarded, but now he has two pieces on the same diagonal as my bishop. Pawn to c5, let's continue with the plan. I mean, obviously, if he takes with the knight, I'm just going to be winning material, but he's just not able to take with the pawn. And currently, I have 1, 2, 3 pieces targeting his d4 pawn. He only has 2 pieces protecting the pawn. But queen to d2 was played, and now we're definitely winning a pawn. The knight on f3 is overworked. It's guarding the queen, it's guarding the pawn, which means once I take the queen, it removes the guard of the pawn, and now my bishop is able to take and attack his rook. Now we're just ahead by 2 clean pawns. Okay, rook to b1 was played. I'm trying to infiltrate into his position, but I'm not seeing an easy way to do it. Definitely not going to be sacrificing my rook, but okay, I'm ahead by 2 pawns. Let's start trading. Knight c3 is also a very strong move. It hits his rook. He's not able to take with the knight because it outright blunders his rook, and if he moves his rook thinking he's applying pressure to my knight, he's going to get fucked. Okay, he played rook to c1. Knight e2 is now just a fork, and there goes his rook, which means there goes the game. And the opponent resigns. More modern defense against 2,000 players. Stick around. Our opponent is now 2,000, and we're gonna be finishing off with a bang. More modern defense. Knight f3, let's just go bishop to g7. Pawn d4, signature move. Pawn goes to d6. And once a3, I'm not trying to play bishop g4. I'm trying to play a6, b5, and then bishop to b7. So that move, I could say it's wasting time. So knight c3, we play b5. Remember the plan? Bishop goes to b7, chase away the knight, win the pawn. That's the plan. He saw it. He plays a3. We're still going to be fianchettoing the bishop. And now we want to play knight d7 followed by c5. These types of ideas. So the bishop goes to d3. I mean, knight c6 should do something. Pawn d4, knight e5. Nah. Let's just go knight d7, pawn c5. And then eventually we're going to develop our knight to f6 and then get working out the center of the board. Bishop to f4. Now, the first thing that came to mind was to sacrifice my bishop, knight takes e4, and then play e5, but I'm sure that's not worth it. So let's just continue with the game plan, pawn c5. I have two pieces attacking d4. He only has one piece guarding d4, so I'm assuming he has to take. And then once he takes, we play knight takes, and that's more pressure on his e4 pawn, more pressure on the bishop, and then my knight could go to f6. So he took the pawn, we take with the knight, apply pressure to the bishop, apply pressure to the e4 pawn, and once I play knight f6, that's more pressure to the e4 pawn. Now, one thing that I think is going to happen is once I play knight f6, he's going to play e5 and then just try to chase away my knight. Now, queen e2, yeah, e5 is definitely coming. I don't want to play e5 myself. I'm thinking about playing pawn d6 though. Thinking about playing pawn d6. Now, knight f6, pawn e5. If I takes, knight takes, could say I'm winning a pawn. If bishop takes, however, I just castle. Let's just play principled chess. I wanted to play d6 and maybe queen c7, but that's very slow. I have three pieces attacking e4. He has three pieces guarding e4, and then he just got his king out the center of the board, so I'm going to do the same. Now, both of our king is castled. Like, this is just a regular position. I can't say that I'm better here, and there's just nothing I could do about him pushing the pawn to e5. And again, I don't want to play pawn to e5 because it's going to weaken my pawn on d6. So he puts his rook on the same line as my queen. Very alarming. Very alarming. Maybe queen b6. Yeah, let's just go queen b6. Get my queen off the same line as the rook. Rook to d8, rook to c8 is the plan. And there's a lot of ideas with pawn to b4. You know, hit the knight, and if he takes, my queen attack his b2 pawn. And one thing I want to tell you guys is bishops are still better than knights, but just not this knight, you know, because it's like worst case scenario, the bishop has nowhere to go. And it's very important that you keep the tension. So no need to take this bishop unless he tries to force away my knight or tries to escape the bishop. Remember, we don't want to be rushing when we're playing chess. So he did decide to play pawn e5. And we're going to take. We're not going to be, unless there's knight h4. Knight h4 hits the bishop, bishop h2, and then, think. Knight h4 hit the bishop, bishop h2. The knight is the main defender of the pawn. So we eliminate the knight. And then once the queen takes, we take, let's just take on e5. That's just being greedy. I'm not going to do all of that just for a pawn. Putting my knight on the edge of the board, giving up a bishop for a knight. All of that is not worth a pawn. Let's just take. So we have two very strong bishops. Pawn on e7 is unprotected, and we need to get the rooks in the game. So he took with the knight. Taking here doesn't give me anything. I want to play pawn e6 so that way I'm able to put my knight on d5, but I don't think I'm trying to rush that idea. So let's just play rook to d8 here. Rook to d8, followed by rook to c8, bishop e3, slightly afraid of it because it pins my knight. But the moment he pins my knight, I'm just going to pull the queen back to c7 and I'm fine. Okay, so he got his rook in the game as well. Still don't get anything from taking there. Let's continue to improve my position. Rook to c8. Now every single piece. Show me one of my pieces that are not doing anything. And if you say this dark squared bishop, then you're incorrect because my dark squared bishop is fine. All I need to do is move my knight out the way and I should be okay. Eventually, I genuinely forget about b4. b4, if takes, I'm hitting b2 and I'm hitting the unprotected bishop. I just forgot. But, you know, my last moves weren't bad because all my pieces are doing well now. There's actually a move that I didn't see. And that's actually knight takes f7. But if knight, I think that's what he's calculating now. He's really calculating it to see if it works. If knight f7, king f7, queen e7, I'm just going to move my king and I'm safe. So he plays knight e4. Who's this guy's coach? Bro, you should have just sacked the knight. I have 1, 2, 3 attackers on your knight, sir. Well, okay, maybe he thinks he has 2 defenders, but what happens after I just take the knight and you take with the bishop? And then I take your bishop. Or are you going to sacrifice your queen? The guy just blundered a piece. Okay, how do we take it though? Maybe take with the knight so that we were able to guarantee the bishop trades. Yeah, let's take with the knight. So that way I can guarantee the bishops coming off the board. Just like that, he blundered an entire piece. I tell you guys, the modern people beat themselves when you play the modern. Because for one, they've never seen these types of opening before. You know, we're Hikaru. We are Hikaru. He sent me a message saying, I'm sorry I didn't see the second knight. Don't be sorry, bro. Don't be sorry. I'm chill. I'm happy you didn't see that second knight. So he took with the bishop, and I'm just going to take with the knight here. Just take with the knight and everything is fine. No, there's really no sack. I mean, if he's trying to trade rooks off the board, we're definitely going to be trading the rooks. Pawn c3. Okay, I mean, I'm just trying to trade as many pieces off the board at this point, to be honest. Like, we know that we shouldn't be giving up bishops for knight, but I mean, I'm sure there's nothing wrong with just giving up my dark squared bishop for the knight and then playing something like rook to d8 and then playing something like rook to d1 and then just trade every single piece off the board. That's what we're going to do. Like, you're ahead in material, don't take any risk. Just trade, trade, and more trade. So he took with the bishop. Let's get the rooks off the board. That's 1 rooks off the board. And don't be giving the opponent the open file like this if you don't intend to immediately challenge the open file. So rook to d8, if he takes, my queen takes, everything is still guarded. I'm just ahead by a clean piece. And all I'm doing is trading all the pieces off the board. So he traded rooks as well. Let's just take with the queen. Queen to d2 is coming next. Okay, he plays bishop to e4. Let's play queen to d5 first. I'm lining up my queen on the same diagonal as his weak g2 pawn, so I'm automatically threatening some nasty discovered attacks on his king, which is why he played f3, which is a very nice move. Oh my god, what am I doing? What was that? Oh my lord, that was a bad move, because I was thinking about playing knight g3, but then queen e7 and he's threatening checkmate. What am I doing? Knight d6, queen e7, queen e6. Oh my lord, that was terrible. Okay, fine. Let's just pull the queen back. That was bad. I blundered a pawn. After queen take... Oh my god. That was not the square for the knight. What am I doing? If I go here, I'm mated. If I go queen e6, he checks. Block with the knight. And I'm losing. What's the threat? Queen d8 is the threat. And queen e8 is also the threat, which means I could try queen c6. Queen here, check, block. Let's go queen here, check, block. Let's try that. Oh my lord, I don't know what I'm doing. It's crazy. So that's the only check that he has. And then I'm going to block with the knight. Now we block with the knight, and at least I'm not getting checkmated, but blundering a pawn like this and then getting this position, I shouldn't have allowed all of this, for sure. And now he has a very strong bishop. He's getting his king in the game. I'm going to try to start some attack on his king. So let's go bishop to d5. I'm trying to go bishop c4 with some queen to d2 ideas. Or maybe I need to play f6 and king up. It's just that he doesn't really have any checkmate, so I'm just going to be patient. So bishop c5. Guess he wants to play bishop e7. So we're going to play f6, and if bishop e7, we play king up. Yeah, let's do that. So let's go f6. And if the bishop goes here, which means my knight is going to be under attack, I go king f7 and I guard the knight. So bishop e7, king f7, the knight is guarded and the bishop is under attack. So now he has to move away the bishop. That was a nice defensive move. And then once the bishop moves, okay, there's no queen checks. No queen checks. Let's play h5 actually. h5, h4. So that way I'm trying to trap his king in a little mating net. If I get a pawn on okay, he's trading the queens off the board. I like that. Yeah, he's trading the queens. I think he's panicking because his time is running out. Now let's just start attacking his pawns because we're in the end games and the goal is to attack the pawns. Okay, he hits the knight. Let's move the knight out the way. Now I'm threatening to fork his king and his bishop, and I'm threatening this pawn on b3. So he plays b4. We're still going to be forking the king and the bishop because all we're trying to do is trade. Let's just get that off the board, get the king in the game, and this is now just completely winning. Okay, let's play h4. I'm trying to put him in zugzwang now. Like, for example, he's just not able to move any of his pawns. If he move any of his pawns, I'm just going to take it. And if he moves his king, he's going to allow my king to make progress. So he moves his king. Now my king is making a lot of progress. If he check, I just move. He moves his king again. Let's play f5. And then if he moves his king, I play g5 to prevent this. And then once he moves his king, I play f4 to prevent his king from going there. Now he has to step his king back. Okay, a5, that's just a free pawn, bro. Now I'm just going to queen. Hits the bishop. Let's pull the bishop back, roll the pass pawn. And if he attacks the pawn, I just take both of his pawns. And okay, this is now just completely winning. And he also only have 9 seconds on the clock, which is why he resigns.